in Europe, if approved, if Starmer bows down to Beijing, as these protesters are saying. Behind me you can see nobody wants this.
No repression at borders! We know that we have to stand up to the abuses of China. And what worries me is that we have a government right now that seems to be scared of China.
What are you doing here at the protest? That's an interesting sign you've got there. Clearly you're not a fan of our Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Why is that?
It's kowtowing to the Chinese government, right? A dictator regime.
Robert Jenrick defected to Reform yesterday. He called the Conservative Party and Kemi Badenoch a leader with no backbone. She's obviously shown up here today and done a speech. It's kind of unprecedented to have that sort of flagrant support. What did you think about her speech and her backing this?
I think any party backing our cause, like going against the building of the embassy, I'd say we welcome them.
Why are you here today?
So I'm Tibetan and I'm here to oppose the Chinese mega embassy being built here. Unfortunately, we think the UK government might allow this to happen, and I think it sends the wrong message to people who have been oppressed by the Chinese government, who are still being continuously oppressed in free countries. There are lots of Chinese decisions which are being followed by Chinese police states.
Now, we know that there are plainclothes Chinese policemen potentially in the crowd, so a lot of them want to stay anonymous, which is very understandable. Why are you here today?
Because it's very simple. It's no mega embassy, and this is absolutely unacceptable because this is a very peak area, and I don't think any one of the country they will have choose one of the peak area, prime area, and make it to their one of the I think it's the biggest embassy in Europe. So this is absolutely
across the UK on DAB+. On YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Coming up to 3 minutes past 6, welcome to Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan in for Jeremy Kyle. A big 4 hours to come. And breaking this morning, Trump slams surrender Starmer. So can the Chagos Islands giveaway be prevented? We're going to go live to the Chagos Islands and the acting First Minister in the show. We broke the story yesterday on Talk Breakfast in an exclusive that 4 patriots, British Chagosians, have gone back to those islands, and they've told me on this programme they will fight for their lives to keep the Chagos Islands British. Meanwhile, the BBC finally admit that there are grooming gangs in London, but did the mayor get the memo? And following announcements, of course, around Reform's front bench and the appointment of Robert Jenrick to Shadow Chancellor, a simple question for you at 4 minutes past 6 in the morning. Can Reform UK fix the British economy? My number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note, and as the saying goes, let's talk. Now, I'm delighted to say that you can hear us on the radio, DAB+, in-app and online, and I'm delighted to say that more of you are listening for longer to the home of common sense. I can only thank you. Our job is to represent your views, get your concerns on the radio and the telly. Of course, you can listen on the radio. You can also watch us. Neha is directing our TV output this morning. All you do is go to YouTube, put the word TALK into the search bar, click on that, and then up we pop, hit the live button, and you can watch a television product and look at all of the big names that feature on today's show. We're going to start today with the front pages, and we begin with the Daily Telegraph, who I've got to say ran our Talk Breakfast exclusive on their website yesterday afternoon. They've picked up on the story. The headline, "Do not give away Chagos, Trump tells Starmer." Why is it the leader of the free world? Why is it the president of a foreign country, the United States, that's more concerned about British sovereign territory than our own Prime Minister? I've got to say there's a theme emerging when it comes to the governance of this country. It's not only Starmer. It was Theresa May, it was Boris Johnson. We've had this for years now, David Cameron. And it is a theme of surrender. Net zero is industrial surrender, is it not? Open borders are civilizational surrender. And now we're literally giving away British land. I've got to tell you, there is no solid legal foundation for us dispensing with the Chagos Islands. What I find particularly amazing is that Donald Trump had guessed, because he's a man with common sense, right? He's a little crazy sometimes. His remarks are off the cuff, but he's definitely got common sense. He's not a billionaire by accident. And he figured that perhaps the reason why we're giving away the Chagos Islands is because we need the money. That's why actually in a press conference he said, why are they doing this? Do they need the money? Do they need the money? He doesn't know that we're paying billions to give away militarily significant British sovereign land to a country in Mauritius, which, by the way, is not just best buddies with China, but has no claim on the islands, has never owned the islands. Make it make sense. So we're going to cover that this morning. Ex-army chiefs, number 10, dishonest on defence. A letter drawn up by a number of military figures and a senior member of management here at Talk Radio are behind this letter, urging the government to spend 5% of our GDP on defence. Do you support that move? Would you be willing to see departmental budgets shrink in other areas, NHS, education, policing, in order to have a proper military? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Bad news for those waiting for a hip operation. NHS hip operations cancelled for months, and this is a supply chain issue. The Germans make this special material, which is part of a hip operation replacement, and we're going to now wait months for some fresh hips in this country. Why don't we make that material ourselves? The Times newspaper, children face review of right to special needs support at 11. Trump pulls his support for Chagos Islands deal, and Eighth Force joins Epstein Files investigation. Daily Mail, Britain faces 1936 moment, defence chiefs warn PM. Ex-ministers and former military leaders invoke spectre of World War II as they accuse Starmer of not being honest on MOD spending. Well, of course he's not, because there's been a pathetic increase in military spending since this government came to power, and all of it has been swallowed up with inflation, which is all thanks to Rachel from Accounts and her policies, which are inflationary, including those pay rises in the public sector, but also delayed procurement programs and pay rises for soldiers. So, OK, that's necessary. Our soldiers deserve a pay rise. But we're not talking here about more munitions, more bullets, more tanks, more planes, more aircraft carriers. This small increase is just so we can keep our heads above water and maintain the status quo. Well, there are more people that have entered the country illegally since Starmer became Prime Minister than are in our army. Let that one sink in. So I think we've got to ramp it up. And I think that every single department needs to cut their cloth accordingly and behave a bit more like a business and look at their bottom line, the Home Office, the Education Department, the NHS. Are you telling me that there's no waste in the NHS? Has anyone ever been inside a hospital? It's a story of waste. It's only waste. I remember I tumbled off my motorbike a few years ago. I mean, OK, it wasn't fun, but you should see the other guy. But I went in, I got an X-ray, all that stuff. They got it wrong. They misread my back. I've got an unusual back, but that's fine. They gave me a back brace for like 2 weeks, and it was a really expensive. This is a really good bit of kit. This is like 300 quid's worth of back brace provided by the NHS. Well, I'm very grateful. And you strap yourself in, and it lets the vertebrae heal, no problem. I then return with the back brace going, I'm giving this back, it's 300 quid. It's just Velcro and plastic and all those fabrics, man-made fabrics. And they went, oh no, we can't take it back because of health and safety. That's 300 quid down the toilet. And by the way, what about the environmentalists? This is a big lump of plastic and Velcro and man-made fibres. So it's sat at home somewhere gathering dust. NHS, it's not, there isn't some waste, it's only waste. So I personally would let these departments cut their cloth, and what we can then do is give that to the military. What I want, folks, let me know if you disagree, by the way, but I want aircraft carriers, I want tanks, I want those amazing night goggles that they have. I want airplanes in the sky that are invisible. I want stealth bombers. I want missiles. Not because I love war, not because I love conflict, but it's a dangerous world. As it was in 1936 when Winston Churchill, do you remember him? Winston Churchill, we shall fight them on the beaches. Winston Churchill was called a warmonger by guess who in 1936? The left. Because what did the left do? They always surrender. Net zero is surrender. Open borders is surrender. And not investing in your military is the very definition of surrender. The Sun newspaper, victory for fans and landlords. Swig when you're winning. This is great news. 1 a.m. pub hours for more games in the World Cup. If I was Prime Minister, and we can only dream, wouldn't that be nice? And what I would do if I was Prime Minister, I would continue to host Talk Breakfast, Christian. I actually would. And I'll tell you why I would be the first Prime Minister to be on the radio and the telly every morning. And the reason I would do, I'm not actually joking, is because then I talk to you and you tell me what you think about what's going on, you know, the economy, the real cost of living. Forget those fake inflationary figures. Are you telling me that inflation's 3%? Do me a favour. That's not true. Real inflation in some areas of people's lives is 5, 10, 15%. And if I was on the radio, then I could listen to you, you call me, you do your texts, you do the voice notes, and sometimes you could go, listen, Dolan, you're not, you know, we're cracking the whip with you here. You're Prime Minister. We're not getting what we need. We have a political class that are detached from the needs of the British people. So, iPaper now next up. Epstein trafficking police in plea for witnesses as Met examines Andrew bodyguard claims. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, by the way. They all knew. The bodyguards knew about Andrew. The courtiers knew. The firm, the management, the CEO, the PRs, the butlers, the undergardeners, and King Charles. They all knew that Andrew was a wrong 'un. Daily Mirror, killer farmer exclusive. Tony Martin's £2.5 million gift to pub landlady. More power to him. That poor man was jailed for shooting a burglar. Well, I would take the view at 12 minutes past 6 on a Thursday morning that if you break into someone's property, you have, are you ready for this? 0 human rights. 0. The Guardian, sites could be blocked over revenge porn and deep fakes. Daily Express, proves Starmer does not care about victims of rape. Grooming gang survivor Ellie Reynolds says PM meeting request has been ignored. Labour have got a blind spot about the grooming gangs, and I'll tell you for why. Because it doesn't fit their diversity is our strength narrative. It's unfortunate, isn't it? But let me tell you, Prime Minister, the facts don't care about your feelings. Get over it. And please don't give away the Chagos Islands. What I'm going to do this morning is try, Christian, to use this platform to keep the Chagos Islands. Wouldn't it be amazing if Talk, the home of common sense, and Talk Breakfast did our bit in convincing the Prime Minister to tear up that deal? Because I don't agree with Donald Trump about everything, but by God, he's right about this. We must not surrender these islands, and we'll be speaking to the acting First Minister on the programme later in the morning. With me in the studio now is one of my favourite political commentators, broadcaster and journalist, and former advisor to the Conservative government, Charlie Rowley. Good morning, Charlie.
Good morning, Mark.
So good to see you. Where to start? The Chagos Islands surrender. Donald Trump has run a bit hot and cold on this one. It's my understanding he was strong-armed into backing the deal in recent days, but he's back on Truth Social. And he said the following: I've been telling Prime Minister Keir Starmer of the United Kingdom that leases are no good when it comes to countries. And he's making a big mistake by entering a 100-year lease with whoever it is that is claiming right, title and interest to Diego Garcia, strategically located in the Indian Ocean. I get it. You get it. Our viewers and listeners get it. Donald Trump gets it. Keir Starmer does not.
Well, and how many other subjects are there where that is obviously also the case, where we all seem to understand what's right in front of us, what the problems are that could be faced, whether it's on benefits, whether it's on spending, whether it's on welfare, whatever it is. The NHS that you talked about a second ago, people know that
there isn't some waste. It's only waste.
It's a lot of waste there, and we can all see that. But obviously, a few people in Number 10, including the Prime Minister and his Foreign Affairs Advisor, maybe Jonathan Powell, and maybe one or two others, can't. This is the one final U-turn that the Prime Minister needs to make and start afresh if he has got that political capital left, because this is now at a point where, as you say, Donald Trump has tweeted yesterday. We now know his firm position, where there was a bit of flip-flopping from the US Department, whether it was a good thing, whether it was not, whether Donald Trump was going to back the deal, whether he wasn't. He's now made it absolutely plain that in part of that message he put out last night, should Iran decide not to make a deal, that's a deal with the US on its nuclear capabilities, and actually sort of heed the cause of the West, it may be necessary for the United States to use Diego Garcia. Now, that is plain and simple. The US may need to use that as a military base to protect itself, to protect us as a UK, and the fact is that us giving it up for a pretty penny of £35 billion to give it away, and then to lease it back, which will cost billions more, to give up a piece of strategic territory to protect us and to protect the West. The President of the United States is saying that is not a good deal. We all know it's not a good deal. The Prime Minister should U-turn. The deal should be scrapped.
Well, indeed. And if the Prime Minister U-turns on this, it will be a U-turn that I celebrate. And I firmly commit at 6:16 on a Thursday morning not to attack the Prime Minister if he does this. I will do a special Dolan's Dispatch, and I can write it now live on the show and say, Prime Minister, well done. You've shown humility, you've shown common sense, you've shown wisdom, and I'm deeply grateful that you've torn up this Chagos Islands surrender, and history will judge you kindly. In fact, when you go just after May, is it going to be May the 7th is the local election? Yes. So when you go on the 8th, on the morning of the 8th, and the delivery truck turns up at Number 10 for all your glasses and suits paid for by someone else, I will say that history will judge you kindly. I will say that you were the Prime Minister that saved the Chagos Islands. What is the likelihood that Starmer will think again on this?
Well, that is
very high.
Very high, considering, well, you'd hope it is, considering all the other U-turns.
Captain Flip-Flop.
Exactly. Of all the other, if you can say to the country we're cancelling local elections in 30 areas because of what was originally, supposedly, this advice that said it was OK or it was too complicated and councils made their own decisions, passing the buck there, then all of a sudden a small bit of legal advice that pops up, not so small in my view, but there you go, that should have been there from the start, that I think probably, if we saw that conversation that took place between the Department of Communities and local government, we might actually know that advice already existed. But anyway, they chose to U-turn rightly earlier this week to make sure that those elections go ahead. That's the right thing to do. He should now U-turn on this because it's the right thing to do strategically, for security, for maintaining our relationship, obviously, with the US, which is the biggest superpower militarily, to protect us here in the UK when we've got so many other threats from Iran, from Russia, from China, that also could abuse, basically, swoop in after we lease back the Chagos Islands, because it's strategically important to them too. We need to hold on to these assets because they are assets. Military assets, strategic assets, security assets. We need them. And so I think the Prime Minister, who has, I'm afraid, used up all of his political will with his MPs at the minute. I know this might not be an issue that necessarily resonates with, people who are waking up this morning and are going to, they might not know about the Chagos Islands.
And it doesn't directly affect the lives of my viewers and listeners per se.
Exactly, but it does matter to people in Westminster, because obviously the one thing that MPs have to do when there is so much devolution in this country, whether it's to councils or to mayoralties and all the rest of it, it is national security. And so when the Prime Minister has eaten up all of his political will and all the other U-turns, he had to make an impassioned speech to them 2 weeks ago to say why they should keep him where he is. This, if he wants to leave office dying on this hill of giving up the Chagos Islands, I think there'll be a lot of backbench MPs, a lot of Labour MPs, a lot of Labour veterans who are asking the Prime Minister, don't do this. Do not give up the Chagos Islands. He should listen to them.
It's a theme of retreat, a theme of surrender. What's next? The Isle of Wight? The Isle of Man? The Isle of Scilly? You know? Maybe the Chinese quite fancy having Northern Ireland.
Well, exactly. And the complete irony of people that are going back to the Chagos to try and reclaim and put up a permanent settlement there were issued with dispersal orders, eviction orders. Those are people that have come from the Chagos, and yet we in this country can't be able to deport anyone that comes over to these shores illegally.
Make it make sense. Well, we broke the story, and I've got to tell you that it really hit the front pages, including of the Telegraph yesterday, our exclusive interview with the acting First Minister of the Chagos Islands. We beat the BBC to it. We beat Sky. We got the story. Here's a clip of us talking to Misli Mandarin, who will die for his island.
We're just being served this piece of paper to leave the island, to leave my homeland from the British Patrol, from the British Indian Ocean Territory Patrol. They just served me this, which is absolutely a disgrace.
Mr. Mandarin, how long do you think that you can stay on the island?
We're going to stay forever. Our rights have to be respected now. We're going to stay. So the British Patrol, they have to take us by force from these islands. We are not moving anywhere. I will die for my island. I say it so many times. I'm ready. I'm here. I'm ready to die for my island. They have to take me by force and put me back on the ship again to remove me here. My Prime Minister is very, very hard for me because he don't look about his own British people. And I will say to him, from the bottom of my heart, listen to us, right? Leave our country as it is. Leave it as British. Let the Chagosian come back as British. Let me be on my island as British. Don't exile me a second time. This is something started with the Whitehall itself, FCDO. You got civil servants really don't care about people. They just make decisions. Like today, you got civil servant came on my island, served me this paper, right? So this is wrong.
Wrong is the word. We're hoping to speak to Misli Mandarin, the acting First Minister of the Chagos Islands, in the 7 a.m. hour in approximately 50 minutes' time, just after 7. Lots of messages coming in. Stuart, good morning, Mark. Brits evicted from sovereign territory 6,000 miles from home, while Labour lets thousands of migrants cross the channel to the UK. Make it make sense, says Stuart. Sean in Gloucester, good morning, Mark. I'm just waiting for U-turn number 458 on the Chagos Islands. We really shouldn't need Trump to stand up for us against our own government, and it's obvious that Keith Stalin lied to Trump as well about the Chagos giveaway. Bill in Romsey, good morning, Mark. We gave the Falklands and Gibraltar the choice of self-determination, so therefore the Chagos people should have the same choice. Cliff in Berkshire, good morning, Mark. Too many previous governments have ignored the military and cut the monies going therein. We're almost starting from scratch now, and as we're discovering, military kit is very expensive. And Dave says, good morning, Mark. It's okay having military hardware. The biggest problem is recruitment and retention, and governments of all colours have done nothing to deal with that. Dave, you're right. They don't get the equipment. They don't get the support. Our society doesn't respect them enough. Do you know how veterans are treated in the United States? If they get on a train, someone stands up and gives them their seat. Veterans are deified. They are respected. They are looked up to in the United States. And here they are treated like something that you would find on the bottom of your shoe. Look at the homeless veterans on the streets whilst we're accommodating illegal immigrants in 3- and 4-star hotels with 3 meals a day. It's a true, true crime. We've got a problem with the military. We need to invest. It is 6:23. More to come. Talk Breakfast.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
.26 Talk Breakfast, top of the morning to you. And breaking this morning, Trump blasts surrender Starmer over the Chagos giveaway. Here's a voice note from Kevin.
Morning, Mark. Kevin in Sheffield. Regarding trying to find money to pay for defence, for instance, I believe we can easily find that money. We just really have to stop giving money away on stupid things like foreign aid to countries that are sending rockets into space, etc. Chagos Islands, why are we paying to give away something utterly ridiculous? We can find this money very easily, but unfortunately we have to be seen to be kind to the whole world, and it looks like we have to pay for the whole world's problems. I think charity begins at home, and we ought to start concentrating on our citizens and our country. Carry on the good work, Mark.
Thank you, Kevin. What a brilliant voice note. Common sense. It'll never catch on. You get it. I get it. Charlie Rowley gets it. Our viewers and listeners get it. The mice scurrying around central London as we speak get it, but our Prime Minister does not. Just on NHS waste, by the way, because my argument is that we can pay for more military investment by cutting waste in the public sector. Got a message here from Sharon. No, forgive me, it's not Sharon, it is Graham, who says, "Good morning, Mark. Whilst you're on about waste in the NHS, I once received a letter telling me I'd be getting a letter with an appointment. When that letter arrived, it told me to call the number to make an appointment. It makes you lose all hope." That's Graham in Stirling. We do need, don't we, to have a look at waste in the public sector, Charlie. And it's my view that if Jeff Bezos and the senior management of Amazon were responsible for the management of the NHS, they could probably cut the budget in half.
Yeah, I think that's
because what would they do immediately? They would cut the workforce straight away by 30%, and they would deploy AI. That would be, and that's, by the way, that's like the first morning before they've had lunch.
Yes, yeah, and redeploy, I think, some of those resources into things that we actually need. So whether that's maybe more research into things like actually tackling things like cancer and Alzheimer's and dementia, where those health issues are only expanding. They're only, these waiting lists will get longer because of those health conditions. We're living longer, we're getting older. There are more and more people that suffer from dementia and Alzheimer's that we haven't got all the research for. So that should have been done years ago. Had we had the courage to admit where for so long the NHS has been put on a pedestal as if it's some sort of religion, that you can't touch the NHS, you can't cut anything in the NHS because it's this big, beautiful organisation that nothing goes wrong. When, of course, everybody's got a horror story about the NHS. The people that work there are brilliant. And,
most definitely. No one's got a problem with the nurses, the doctors, the hospital porters, the cooks, the cleaners. They are all heroes.
Exactly. But the management and the way in which the money just gets sort of sucked into the consultant side of things, the absolute waste of maybe, alternatives that are available. So going to see a pharmacist, going to see if you can get a GP's appointment. Maybe you don't need to see a GP's appointment.
If you've got tonsillitis, there's no reason why the pharmacist can't look in your mouth with a torch and see that it's an infection.
Exactly. And I think we did a story the last time I was here not so long ago about people sort of that turned up to NHS because they had, just a bit of a cough or their, overgrown toenails 100%. And things like that. And it was all sort of, ridiculous. It's A&E, for goodness sake. And it says, it's accident and emergency. If it's not emergency, shouldn't be there.
Well, that's right. And I don't believe in the privatisation of the NHS. I think that the model is a smart one. It's a sort of unitary, singular service which gives it enormous buying power when it comes to pharmaceuticals or technology. So the principle of the NHS being one big fat customer for health services is a smart thing to do. I wouldn't break it up. America's a terrible example of healthcare, and they've got private healthcare, and really it's just such a racket because of the insurance companies and how much profit they make. Republic of Ireland have got Irish relatives. It's also not great. They spend an awful lot of money rather than the luxury that we have of just turn up. You're not thinking about your credit card or whether you've paid your premiums. So the principle of it is great, but it's very, very clear that across the public sector, whether it's the Home Office, whether it's the Department for Education, whether it's the health department, that the mentality and the approach of a corporation would be better for everyone involved, better for the taxpayer, better for the patient.
Yep, totally. And it's always, this is the failure of government as well as other public services. So, I don't just want to attack public sector, but it's, the cover-ups. It's the idea that, we can't be seen to be failing, therefore we won't tell the minister this, or we won't reveal this, we will just contain it.
Which is why you get hospitals with a mysterious number of babies dying in maternity wards.
Exactly. If you are a pilot, you have to log every flight. You have to tell your bosses what there might have been a technical problem here or a flashlight here, but it's all fine. Or I took off a bit faster or landed a bit quicker or whatever. But all things are fine because you just have to log everything to ensure that mistakes are not made and everybody is continually updated and you learn from best practice. That doesn't happen in the health service. It doesn't happen in education because there are too many people that want to cover up because they don't want to admit that there's a failure here, because if there's a failure there, then they feel that their job's on the line. So we need to get into a culture of telling it as it is in the NHS. And ultimately, it's about patients. Patients just want the service. If there's a problem, they want to be seen, they want it in good time, they want good treatment, and then they just want to go home.
Of course they do, of course they do. And we are customers because we pay our taxes, so it's not free as such. It goes, we pay very, very handsomely for the NHS. But what I would do is I'd have public funding and I'd have free availability, and then in the middle I would have an entirely corporate sort of commercial culture and a corporate commercial mindset. And the reason I say that is because I've got viewers and listeners to this show and they work for companies. And what do their companies do? Well, they'll have an HR department and they've got an accounts department and they've got senior management. And they have a spreadsheet, Charlie, and they have a look at what's coming in and they have a look at what's going out. And they'll look at a certain department and go, what does he do? What does she do? Where's the value there? The reason they do that is because they're commercial enterprises, and if they don't, they will die. So it's existential for them to look at costs. If people think of companies like Sainsbury's, that they're rolling in money, no, their margins are about 2%, which is why the national insurance tax rate wasn't just bad for small and medium-sized enterprises, it was really bad for some of the big players too. Sainsbury's has said, we've got to find 500 million from somewhere. And I can assure you, we're going to have to sell an awful lot of bird's eye potato waffles to make up that shortfall. But what do? They have AI and they have a culture of accountability and they have the bottom line. And I think that the public sector needs to have bottom line, because I think people that work in councils and across the public sector feel like it's money, no object. It's not their cash, and it feels like an endless money tree.
Exactly, and that's why whether you're pro-reform or anti-reform, you can't fault, I don't think, the idea of them trying to do things differently, such as this Doge unit going into local authorities where there are huge pay packets paid to the bosses and chief executives of some of those councils, some of the most inefficient and undelivering councils, for what it's worth. Why are those people?
How hard is it to collect bins once a week?
Well, in Birmingham, very difficult by the sounds of things.
I mean,
but you're right,
that's basic.
It is. Absolutely. These things aren't difficult. We make them difficult because of the bureaucracy, because of an overinflated workforce, because things are too difficult politically when you have political opposition to things, usually on the left. That try to stop you doing whatever it is you want, because you need to have a diversity quota there, you need to have a risk assessment here. Just deliver. That's what government should always be about. And I'm afraid we're not getting the delivery from this government, I'm afraid, at all.
Most definitely. Tony says, good morning, Mark and Charlie. Talking about the NHS, I had an appointment at QE Hospital in Woolwich yesterday at 8:30 for a blood test. I was there at 7:45. I waited till 9:30. Then someone appeared and told us that due to staff shortages, there was a 4 to 6 hour wait. I couldn't wait. By the time I left, there was about 60 people waiting. I made my appointment nearly 2 weeks ago. 6 staff members out of 10 were off sick with no backup solution. Why are those people that work in the NHS so ill? Shouldn't they be the healthiest among us? They're in terrible shape, some of those NHS workers. And a lot of them, by the way, because they're in the public sector, they get signed off with stress. What is that? What is stress? I'll tell you what stress is. Stress is German bombs raining over London in the Second World War. The only difference between then and now is we had a military then. We had self-defence. That's gone down the toilet. One of our big stories today, signatories to a letter urging the Prime Minister to increase defence spending to 5%. We're going to cover that. Would you be willing to see other departmental budgets shrink in order to protect the defence of this realm? Let me know your thoughts. Also, our big story today, it was a Talk Breakfast exclusive yesterday. The acting First Minister of the Chagos Islands is in the Chagos Islands. He said he'll fight with his life. Can Surrender Starmer row back on this terrible decision to give away sovereign territory? We'll cover all of that. And before we go, here's a voice note from Matt on hip operations, which have been cancelled for 3 months in the NHS. Take a listen.
Morning, mate. Matt in Warrington. Still loading the van, as always. Bit of bad news. I'm waiting for a double hip replacement. 2 months, extra 2 months waiting for cement, so a bit fed up today. I can tell you, waiting for a hip replacement, these hips, it's the most painful thing. I won't wish it on anyone, maybe apart from Keir Starmer. But anyway, got a soldier on, haven't you? It's been a great week. Carry on all the good work, mate. See you soon. Ta-da.
Matt, I'm so sorry for your hip operation you're waiting for. Double hip as well, big guy. It's so hard, isn't it, for you? Probably it's like sleep, your mobility, and then, of course, work is going to be affected as well. My heart goes out to you, Matt. So just if you're joining us briefly, NHS hip operations cancelled for months. Tens of thousands of knee and hip replacements will be cancelled across Britain because of a global shortage of bone cement. The critical ingredient, which locks the replacement in place, is used in most of the 250,000 operations carried out each year. But Heraeus, one of the world's major suppliers, has suffered a critical machine failure at its main production site in Germany. This is the United Kingdom. We invented the internet, the TV, the personal computer, the telephone. Why can't we make the materials for hip replacements? Why isn't that done in the UK? We've got so much excellence here, so many talented graduates that can't get a job. Britain is in retreat. How do we address it? And how do we get Surrender Starmer to give up his plan to relinquish the Chagos Islands? Talk Breakfast, 6:32. More papers next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
.39 Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan in for Jeremy Kyle all of this week. Thank you for your company. And breaking this morning, Donald Trump slams Surrender Starmer. Can the Chagos Islands giveaway be prevented? Well, lots of messages coming in thick and fast on that one. Margaret in Norfolk says, good morning, Mark and Charlie. Oh, she's just disappeared. Where's she gone? Live radio, folks. Margaret, she must prevail. I'll get to Margaret's message in just a moment. My goodness, this console drives me crazy. Right, here we go. Guy in Oxford. Good morning, Mark. The Labour line is that the Chagos Islands deal is for the UK's security. Just how much secure can you be than having a US military airbase on site? If you're a top lawyer, I'd imagine you work hard to get the best results for your clients. And if you're a government, your duty is to defend your country in the same way. If only we had any lawyers in ours. It's not good, is it, mate? Guy, it most certainly is not good. It's an absolute complete disaster. Natasha talks about military spending, and she says, good morning, Mark. My husband was working in America with the military and had to wear his uniform on a flight. The staff announced to the passengers that they had veterans on board, and there was a round of applause and free drinks, whilst our veterans are homeless and hunted by this Labour government. Natasha uses some choice language to which I'm sympathetic but cannot share with on a family show. Natasha, thank you for that. Forgive me for the outrageous censorship. Margaret in Norfolk has appeared like a vision. She says, good morning, Mark and Charlie. What is behind the Chagos deal? Judge Judy always says, chase the money. Well, someone that certainly shares that view is Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Good morning, Isabel.
Good morning. Well, what an intervention from Trump. And where does this leave the deal? I mean, what is frustrating is that Trump has been so inconsistent on this issue. You know, if he had made this intervention as strongly, as bullishly as he did last night, if he'd made that intervention 6 months ago, 9 months ago, we might not be where we are. And instead, he has been a bit all over the place on it. What I'm hoping, and what I think so many people will be hoping this morning, is it's a case of better late than never, and that this can still be turned around.
It doesn't help, though, Isabel, that the president was likely lied to by our Prime Minister about this deal.
Well, he certainly appeared to be poorly briefed, didn't he, the president, in terms of his misunderstanding that we were selling the islands, that we actually were getting something back for them. Now, even if we were getting billions for them, I would still not say that that is a good deal. You know, it's not the way to make Britain look stronger and more influential in the world to be selling off bits of our territory. But as we all know, it's not even that. We're actually paying for them to be taken away from us, which is completely and utterly bonkers, and everyone can see it. And somehow or other, that message had not cut through to Donald Trump when he originally spoke about it. Well, I think that was when he spoke about it at Davos a few weeks ago, and he was sort of saying, do they need the money? And so he's just sort of been a bit all over the place on it. But I think now he does grasp what's at stake. And, you know, what is at stake is really serious. You know, Diego Garcia, as Trump himself said last night, is very important strategically, for example, for any intervention that the US may want to do on Iran. It puts Iran within striking distance of a long-range bomber mission. So we don't want to be having to ask the Mauritians for permission to use that military base, that US military base, Diego Garcia, in order to launch those strikes, not least because the Mauritians are deeply conflicted on this. They are so close to the Chinese, and the Chinese in turn are very close to the Iranians. So this is absolutely insane. And there is still a chance for Keir Starmer to say, you know what, like so many other things, I just got this one wrong.
Well, I would do a special Dolan's dispatch, Isabel, and I would pay tribute to the Prime Minister if he reverses his position on the Chagos Islands giveaway, because history will judge him kindly. It will judge him very badly if this goes ahead. And you can see the government are trying to accelerate the passage of this legislation through both houses. They want to get this done.
Well, I mean, they just seem prepared to just die in a ditch over it, don't they? And it's utterly bizarre. There is no upside for any of us on this deal. There's only the upside for the Mauritian people who are enjoying a nice period of no income tax, thanks to the generosity of the British people who never wanted to give their money away in this regard. And the only other upside is for the many lawyers who are involved in this extremely sketchy deal. And yet Keir Starmer just seems to want to press ahead. I imagine there will be some pretty frantic diplomatic back channel activity going on today to try to find a way through this, and for Keir Starmer to maybe find a way of backing out that somehow enables him to save face. But he's gone so far down the line, it's quite hard to imagine what that would be other than, an abject humiliation of saying this was a completely mad idea and I should should have recognised that months ago.
Well, indeed, and of course, philosophically and ideologically, he will always be a human rights lawyer who wants to atone for this country's history on our collective behalf, Isabel. Let's take a listen to Mastermind himself, David Lammy, responding to Trump's concerns about the Chagos Islands giveaway. This is earlier this month. February 2025. I've gone mad. It was a year ago. Take a listen.
If President Trump doesn't like the deal will not go forward. And the reason for that is because we have a shared military and intelligence interest with the United States. And of course, they've got to be happy with the deal or there is no deal.
Indeed. Well, of course, sadly, that did not prevail. It didn't come out that way. And for the life of me, Isabel, I still don't understand why the government are participating in this act of national self-harm.
Follow the money. That's all it can be. There are people close to Keir Starmer who are making great deals of money out of this. You know, we can use the word legitimately because they're providing their professional services and advice. I strongly suspect, I said this to you earlier this week, there is much more money sloshing around by way of backhanders, whether that's in Mauritius, whether it's in some other country, whether it's in the UK. I'm sorry, this doesn't stack up. There is only one explanation, that a number of people who are involved in promoting this deal are doing very, very well out of it. And I strongly suspect that none of what we're seeing in terms of fees being earned or whatever it may be in terms of their professional services tells the full story. I love to crack that open. There is much more to this than meets the eye. There is no other logical explanation for British people to be pushing this deal.
Indeed. Look at the Chagos Islands. There's a theme here, Isabel, from this administration. The Chinese super embassy, net zero, open borders, the cult of welfarism. This is a country in retreat. It's a theme of surrender.
And that is so depressing, but we still have a huge amount going for us. It isn't too late. I genuinely don't think it'll be long before it is too late. Certain things that have happened
5 to midnight
are really irreversible. You know, with the best intentions in the world, it's going to be really hard to deport potentially more than 1 million illegal immigrants. And I don't happen to believe we have anything like the idea of how many illegals we have in our country. You know, Mark, I was doing some research yesterday, and it struck me that we only run our national census every 10 years. The last census was in 2021, just as we were coming out of COVID. That tells you, you know, how the demographics of our country are changing, how ethnicity makeup of our country is changing. That is now 5 years old. I don't think a census every 10 years now is fit for purpose, because we are still working off, as broadcasters, as policymakers, politicians, we're working off statistics that are 5 years out of date in a country that is changing so rapidly. You know, we've got hundreds of thousands of people coming in every year. And I think we need to have a better grip of what the true numbers are. And once a decade in this day and age is nowhere near enough for that.
No, it isn't. And the left always want to know, Isabel, why we should have the ethnicity of criminals. We should have their gender and their ethnicity. And the reason why, I think the reason why is because if it turns out that a disproportionate number of people from overseas are committing the crimes, well, then that means that mass immigration is bad, and then we'll stop it. That's why we need to know who is hurting British citizens, whether we are homegrown in our crime wave or whether we've imported it.
Well, it's all about understanding why. You know, crime patterns need to be examined with full information. And the reality is, again, I was looking at this yesterday, so I know that I'm on solid ground when saying in London in particular, there is a disproportionate number of foreign nationals linked to sexual assault cases. Now, there can be 1,001 reasons for that, and it's not simply because you have a certain colour of skin that makes you a bad person.
Correct.
It can be about where you've come from and the difficulties that you are facing when you move to our country and perhaps you don't have the support structures and you turn to crime. And it can be cultural, and we know this from court cases. This isn't me saying some people come from bad countries where it's okay to attack women. It's actually the defendants themselves saying, oh, well, where I come from, it's really not quite such a bad thing to, leer and attack women. That has actually been part of the defence in many cases in which British nationals have been brutally attacked. And so we need full information. Let's stop hiding away from this stuff.
Definitely. Listen, they say the true bit out loud in these court cases. I didn't know that it was inappropriate to follow that woman home or touch her on public transport or any other such horrors. Isabel, thank you so much. What an important conversation we've had this morning. Isabel Oakeshott is Talk's international editor. I'll get a reaction from my brilliant studio guest, Charlie Rowley, in just a moment. More front pages. Can the Chagos Islands giveaway be prevented? Talk breakfast. So let's play out, by the way. Should we spend more on defence? Would you be willing to see departmental budgets shrink to arm our armed forces? Here's Hev.
Good morning, Mark. It's Heath from Kent. Lovely to see you this morning. All the money that's going to these illegals that are coming across the water and in those boats and all that. You imagine if there weren't any of those, all the money that would be saved, and that should go into our defence. We can start with our defence by stop letting them coming in as well.
Hev, brilliant voice note. Agree with every word of it. More front pages to come. 6:51, Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk Breakfast, 6:55. Lovely to have your company. Mark Dolan with you for the entirety of this week, in for the brilliant Jeremy Kyle. I've said that if Starmer changes course on the Chagos Islands giveaway, I will praise him. I'll do a special Dolan's Dispatch. I'm very committed to that. But I will say that Jane's not happy with me. Mark, please don't send that dreadful man any praise whatsoever. He will think we've forgiven him, and we have not. I'll get to more of your messages shortly because the switchboard is absolutely in meltdown. But I need to talk about the economy. And Charlie Rowley, we had a big development from Reform UK, the likely next government of this country, and the Shadow Chancellor, effective acting Shadow Chancellor, Robert Jenrick, who has said that he will reinstate the two-child benefit cap. Nigel Farage agrees, but then says, however, I did sort of want to do it. Is this mixed messaging from Reform?
It could be, but you can forgive them because, you know, it's actually a party that is still quite new, it's still fresh, it's obviously growing, it's professionalising all the time. They are doing politics in a different way. They're not waiting for something to be totally packaged up anymore, I don't think, to then be able to sort of have a huge presentation, a big release. You know, they want to be able, a big reveal, they want to be able, I think, to say that, look, things are moving constantly all the time. I do think there is a case, as it happens, as someone that was a former Conservative advisor, to lift the two-child benefit cap. I think it was imposed, it's been there for such a long time. I do think if you want to have a third child, then you shouldn't be punishing the child.
We want British people to make babies.
And we do. So there is a case for it.
It's a demographic time bomb, isn't it?
Exactly. But I completely understand that if the finances aren't there, readily available, particularly if, as we were just talking about, if you're giving 35 billion away to the Chagos Islands, just to
That's
get rid
a problem.
of...
Christian, where was the... Oh, there you go. It's page 2 of The Sun, right? Yeah, really, really good story. Christian was talking about this before we came on air. Jenrick, I will bring back two-child benefit cap, reforms benefit limit. They're very clear in their messaging, which is that Reform UK will be prudent. We can be trusted with your savings. We can be trusted with the economy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that has to be the message. That has to be their projection to the country, because, you know, they will say that, look, Labour have put up taxes. They've put taxes up for the last 2 years on businesses. Their national insurance contribution that they said they were never going to do, they did. The rise in business rates, the rise in minimum wage, which I think Labour are now starting to talk about whether that's actually feasible, because that will just cost business even more, which will just increase unemployment even more so than what we already heard earlier on this week. So more questions to answer for the Labour government. But obviously the Tories, you know, they haven't... Well, Reform will say that the Tories crashed the economy under Liz Truss. So you've got to have that prudent economic approach.
Very strong on borders, very strong on wokery in our public institutions, but some would argue the soft underbelly of the Reform offer is economic probity. Even the sort of Tory press, the likes of the Mail and the Telegraph, have criticised Reform for flaky economics, for the idea that they will be neo-socialists. And of course, one of the big arguments for that, to support that view, was the idea that Nigel Farage wanted to lift the two-child benefit cap. It's an image that's taken hold, and it's an attack line from the Tories on Reform that they will spend.
Absolutely. And, you know, that's perfectly within the Tories' right to do that, because that's what they've picked up on. But, you know, what Reform have to do is make sure that as it gets close to the election, that they have that coherent plan, that they're able to say, look, we will cut taxes when time allows. They'll probably want to cut taxes anyway for businesses to make sure that there is that economic growth, something that hasn't been delivered under this government, in order to ensure that they've got a safety net when things really do go wrong in this country, when it comes to things like protecting British Steel, or the Scunthorpe Steelworks, or Jaguar Land Rover, or if we do need to make a huge intervention in places like Thames Water, or water companies in general, that, you know, need support because there are huge issues there in our infrastructure, that they've got the money in the bank to do that.
Charlie, have a great Thursday. Come back and see us again soon. Privilege to have you in the studio. Can Surrender Starmer U-turn? It's a U-turn we want. This is Talk Breakfast.
Hello from Crowborough, where the local residents are enraged with what has happened to their community merely overnight, when just 27 single male asylum seeker illegal migrants were bussed into their military training camp. Behind me are local residents, people from all over the country. Shabana Mahmood has said that this is an effective way of getting rid of those expensive, flashy asylum hotels. But unfortunately, these people are still placed within the community.
The whole town is very afraid because these are unvetted men from countries that are, the government warn us not to go to. I've got an 18-year-old daughter and she gets the bus opposite the camp. Do you feel safe for her? No, so that will have to stop. Right. We'll either have to wait with her or take her to wherever she needs to go.
The reason I'm here today is because I live in Crowborough and my family, I've got a wife and children, and just worried about, my wife walking to work and my sons, walking about. Anything can happen, can't it, that nowadays and age, what's going on, what's happening in this country. So I'm just concerned and frightened,
There was support from other towns, other communities, because of course Shabana Mahmood has threatened other communities, and she said they're going to open site after site after site. Well, I would hope that if she's going to try and do that, she learns some lessons about the way she's done it in Crowborough, because this is not finished. We are not finished objecting to this plan.
Grover says no! Grover says no! Grover says no!
We would urge her to reconsider. And whatever she does, she needs to talk to the people that she's imposing these things on.
If you had a direct line to Keir Starmer and Shabana Mahmood, what would you say to them?
Look after your most vulnerable first. It's your priority to look after your vulnerable.
If they're bringing illegal immigrants into a camp in the dead of night, why are they doing that? They're doing that because it's disingenuous, it's dishonest, it's covert, and they're trying to keep the reality away from the local community of what they're actually doing to us. We've now got to the end of the entrance to the camp, we've got cameras, we've got police drones. It's like a cloud that's come over this community.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
.03, you are listening to Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan with you all week. Lovely to have your company in for the brilliant Jeremy Kyle. So much to get through this morning, and breaking at 7 on a Thursday morning, Donald Trump slams surrender Starmer. Can the Chagos Islands giveaway be prevented? Meanwhile, now even the BBC admit that grooming gangs are in London. Did the rather woke mayor get the memo? And Robert Jenrick, the effective Shadow Chancellor on the reform front bench, has claimed that he's going to reinstate the two-child benefit cap. He's going to cut taxes when it's affordable. Can Reform UK fix the British economy? And our other big story this morning, Britain faces a 1936 moment. Defence chiefs warn the PM in a letter that military and spy bosses are demanding Labour double spending, with dire warnings about UK forces being hollowed out and unprepared for war. So would you be willing to see cuts in other departmental budgets in order to arm our troops properly and defend our territories? Let me know your thoughts. My big focus this morning is to get your opinions on the national radio and television airwaves. My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note. And as the saying goes, let's talk. I'm delighted to say you can hear us on the radio, DAB+, in app and online. You can also watch the show and see my brilliant guests. Just head to YouTube, search Talk, hit the live button, and up we pop. Nehar is directing our TV output this morning. The brilliant, marvellous Damien is taking your calls. Christian is running the show, and with his magic fingers, our lead engineer, Mark Gale. Let's take a voice note from Sean on the Chagos Islands giveaway.
Morning, Mark. Sean from Grimsby.
when I got home from work last night and I watched the video of them British Chagosians getting served the eviction notice to tear them off their own land. I mean, how did we even get here? How are we in a situation where we can forcibly deport British citizens from their own country, yet we can't forcibly deport a foreign rapist? Honestly, mate, a big part of me thinks, no, we're done for, mate. We really, really, really are. It's absolutely horrendous. These poor fellas, mate. Anyway, great show, Mark. Got to go. Got to pay for someone's high-end BMW disability car they probably don't need. Great show, mate. Keep it up.
Sean, thank you. And I hear how frustrated you are. And so many of my viewers and listeners are fed up with the cost of living, fed up with a country in retreat, fed up with handing over sovereign territory, fed up with net zero whilst China, India and America are burning coal for fun, fed up with wokery in our public institutions, being told by the NHS that someone having a baby is a birthing mother or a chest feeder. Sick of it. We're sick of it. But the good news is that change is coming. That's why we have democracy. And I do believe that the mother of all political revolutions is coming. Things are going to get worse before they get better, but it's always important to stay hopeful. And what we'll do in the meantime, Sean, is we will hold this egregious government to account, and we will make sure that this lot never return to power. Ex-army chiefs, number 10, dishonest on defence. Sir Keir Starmer is not being straight with the public over defence spending, according to former military chiefs. In an open letter, retired heads of the Army and Navy and an ex-MI6 boss have warned the Prime Minister that the armed forces have been hollowed out by years of chronic underfunding. Well, one of the people behind this very important letter to the Prime Minister is Ted Jeffrey, who is one of the senior producers here at Talk. And a signatory to this letter is Andrew Fox, Senior Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society and former Major in the Parachute Regiment. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Mark.
In this letter, when it's implied that the government and the Prime Minister are not being honest about military spending, how so?
Well, they constantly talk about the need to reach 3.5% and the fact they have spending plans that they'd love to enact. What they never mention is that they mean enacted at some unspecified point in the future. There's no timeline to this. There's no solid commitment on building our way up to the defences that we need for the country. And they're being disingenuous when they don't give us a timeline and don't tell us when this is going to happen. And the reason it's disingenuous is because we need it now.
And whether it's 2% of GDP, 2.5% or 3%, that's not much good, Andrew, when the economy is effectively shrinking.
Correct. And it's a really difficult situation and there are difficult decisions to be made. But I would actually put this increase in spending to you as a savings measure, because war is incredibly expensive, as Ukraine will show, the billions of pounds and dollars that have been needed to keep Ukraine in that fight. And the single best way of preventing war is by having a strong defensive deterrent. And that's what we need right now. We need a navy that can protect our waters. We need the ammunition and artillery to give our troops the punch they need should things come. But hopefully, with a proper level of defence spending, it won't come.
And we have a looming unemployment crisis. Military investment is brilliant for the economy and contains within it many thousands of jobs.
Well, exactly this. I'm currently speaking to you from Israel, which knows a thing or two about the need for defence spending and strong defences. And their economy grew 7% during the recent war they've just had. The existential war of national survival they've just had caused their economy to grow. So this is, investing in our own defences and our own procurement cycles and mechanisms.
Well, it's
arms
because
factories is great.
It's staffing, it's manufacturing, it's everything.
Yeah, you've got it. This is actually a really good way to make British jobs, and at the same time makes Britain a stronger country and a country less likely to have to send its troops to war.
Is it unfair to lay this at the door exclusively of the Prime Minister? Have we seen this neglect of our military over decades, including under the Conservatives?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And, I was serving in the army around the time of George Osborne, and I saw a number of my peers being given involuntary redundancies as the army was shrunk down to, frankly, an unsustainable level. And the army's been struggling to keep up ever since. And I know from my friends in other services that is replicated across the Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy.
The difficult question, I suppose, for anyone that's a signatory to this letter is out of which departmental budgets do you find this money? Because you'll agree, Andrew, that we can't borrow anymore, so we'll have to take it from the pot that's available. Does the money for defence come out of the NHS budget, schools, policing?
It's a great question, and I think we could all point to areas where our government is spending money that we're not entirely comfortable with. Luxury hotels for people who arrive on dinghies would be the very obvious one that springs to mind. But that's nowhere near enough to get us to the level of spending that we need. But the point is, if you take money from somewhere else temporarily to fund defence manufacture, defence procurement, that money is going to make its way back to the economy and make its way back to the government. And it's going to actually be an investment in the long run. That's why the Americans are so keen for people to buy their defence products, because it invests billions and billions of dollars into the US economy. This is not a question of taking money from somewhere else. It's a question of potentially making money further down the line.
Are the signatories to this letter not a bunch of warmongers?
Well, I'm one of the signatories, and I'd be very keen not to see the UK go to war. And I return to my earlier point. Deterrence is the single best thing that we can have to prevent our troops from ever having to fight. People do not attack strong enemies. And if we are, a strong player on the world stage, if we are able to help our European allies be stronger by selling them some of these arms and ammunition that we're making, we're actually making the whole continent safer. So it's the opposite of being a warmonger.
Would you welcome some of the young people who are struggling to get jobs at the moment? Youth unemployment now, unfortunately, Andrew, the highest in Europe, which is a shocking moment for the country. Would you welcome young people into the military? Should we do more to attract young people to join the forces?
Well, look, the armed forces is an incredible career. It is not only very exciting, where you get to do some incredibly cool stuff, but on top of that, it gives you life skills and it gives you the ability to go out from your time in the army and then move on to, other far more successful careers than you would have had if you hadn't joined the army. So I would encourage any young person to get involved with the military, because I had a fantastic 16 years. And I know my soldiers have gone on to really great things, and it can be a real boost for the rest of your life.
Well, Tony has messaged the programme, Andrew, and says, good morning, Mark. Get the work-shy, feckless, anxious youth on benefits into the armed forces. Two options: work or join the military. No get out. Turn benefits into defence spending by either sending them or, as I think is more likely, they miraculously overcome their anxiety or other spurious issues to make it into a regular job. Tony, thank you for that. It doesn't help, though, does it? If you're looking to have military recruitment, Andrew, if those who have served in the forces in the past are being prosecuted for doing their job, for example, in Northern Ireland during the Troubles.
Yeah, and we're seeing some egregious examples of that. And if we're talking about the British defences and how they behave on operations, they absolutely should be held accountable if they break the law. That's what sets us apart from other armies and other countries, is that we retain our morality when we go on operations. But doing it after 50 years is an absolute travesty of justice. Nobody's going to remember things accurately. Nobody's going to be able to give testimony that is meaningful after 50 years. And this hounding of our Northern Ireland veterans is absolutely atrocious.
Andrew, why does Sir Keir Starmer's plan to hand over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius at an enormous cost, why does it matter to my viewers and listeners?
Because the Chagos Islands being British makes us safer. There are significant security threats in that region of the world, from China above all. And having a base there that we can use to forward mount, aircraft and other naval vessels is really important to enable us to project our force around the world. And on top of that, the Americans are clearly a little bit unwilling to be partners with the UK at the moment. And having the Chagos Islands is a really great way of bringing us closer to the Americans, the single strongest military on earth. And again, one of the best things that could possibly deter war and stop us having to send our young men and women to fight.
Now, we know that the president has run a little hot and cold on this Chagos deal, but speaking on Truth Social in the last 24 hours, he's blasted the deal and has urged the Prime Minister to row back on this plan. What chances are there that the Prime Minister will think again, or is this a done deal, do you think, Andrew?
Well, Mark, I think this is looking increasingly likely that he's certainly going to reconsider. He's getting criticism from not only within the UK, but now our strongest and formerly most reliable partner has really given both barrels to Mr. Starmer. So I think every day that goes by with this level of criticism hopefully gives us the chance to reverse this ridiculous decision to hand over the Chagos and pay for the privilege of doing so.
Andrew, can you tell us about your brilliant podcast? Because it's a must listen, and I think my viewers and listeners would enjoy it.
Thank you very much. It's called The Brink. It's with former Daily Telegraph writer and Jewish Chronicle editor Jake Wallace-Simons. And what we try to do is look at how our society can bring itself back from where it is. It's about getting rid of this down with us mentality that we have in the UK and finding positive voices from across the political spectrum who can give us ideas and conversations about how the UK reinvents itself and pulls itself back from the brink of where we are right now.
It's well worth a listen. Check out The Brink on any podcast platform. My thanks to Andrew Fox, Senior Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, host of The Brink podcast, former Major in the Parachute Regiment. And Andrew, I do want to add that we are very, very grateful for your service to this country. In fact, there are no words to express our thanks to anyone that's served in the military on our behalf, placing them in harm's way on a daily basis for the freedoms and values of this country. Someone else that's placed himself in harm's way is the acting First Minister of the Chagosian administration, Misli Mandarin, who has flown with 3 others to the Chagosian Islands. And he joins us now. Good morning, Mr. Mandarin.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Well, I'm well, and we are humbled by your efforts to reclaim this sovereign territory, to keep it in British hands. In the last 24 hours, you've received papers from the UK authorities ordering your eviction from the islands. Do you have an update?
So basically, since we got this order of eviction, no update yet. But the good news is the stance of President Trump gave us big hope as well. And our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, have to reconsider this treaty.
Yes. Why do you think Donald Trump is so unhappy with this deal, Mr. Mandarin?
Because the world is a dangerous place now. And deal like this, like he's clearly said, treaties between countries never stand. So 100 years, 99 years ago, that's going like a flash. And within 2 generations or 1 generation even, and Mauritius can give the territory to China or even India.
Well, of course, he's right. I fully support the president in this position. And Misli, what is the situation like where you are now? You're in a tent, I believe, with your father. How are the conditions as we speak?
So we're surviving. We had food, and we kind of technically breaking the rules. Like the removal order says, we are not allowed to do fire, but we have to cook. We did a little fire, and we have our dinner last night, and now my dad is preparing lunch. But we're surviving, and the most important, we are here.
Do you anticipate that the British authorities will use force to remove you?
So we're gonna have to go over my dead body because we are not going nowhere. And I can tell you very soon we got more Chagosians coming, joining us.
It's very sad, isn't it, that in the 2000s it was proposed that the Chagosians could return to their islands, the British Chagosians, at a cost of around £400 million to create the infrastructure so you could live there. And the British government at the time decided against it. That was a rare opportunity to keep the islands forever.
I can tell you, this amount, 400 million, is exaggerated. If you see those islands, is only a couple of millions, right, to rebuild a thriving population on those islands, and giving £30 billion to Mauritius, taxpayers' money, they can use a little fraction of its money to safeguard this British territory and safeguard British citizens as well.
And of course, the reason why you've flown there and put yourself in harm's way, Mr. Mandarin, is because you believe that if you can settle on the island, you have the right to self-determination, which protects those islands in perpetuity.
Of course. When back then, the Tory and Lib Dem government made KPMG study about resettlement of the Chagosian, something saying clearly there's no legal obstacle for Chagosian to be on Chagos Island. So I'm on Chagos Island. He can set me wherever removal notice. At the end, that's going to go to court. I'm confident we're going to win this because they did this. The eviction of Chagosian was illegal. So you can't send a piece of paper on a basis of an illegal wrongdoing.
A British patrol boat came to the island yesterday and they served you with an eviction notice. Were they armed? Did they point any weapons at you?
No, actually. So what I heard, they only came, they are people behind administration, but if they have to come and remove me, they will get soldiers. So Royal Marines will come and remove me. So we are waiting for that to happen, but we stay in put.
And Mr. Mandarin, you are the acting First Minister of the Chagos Islands, and you're ex-military yourself, aren't you?
Yes, and seeing what's going on right now, serving my country, serving the King, Queen of Britain, is really, really appalling to me that Keir Starmer, as a Prime Minister, order, if he's doing it, order British soldiers to come and remove British people in their homelands. Imagine something like order British soldiers remove Scottish people in one of the Scottish islands. It feels the same thing.
Most definitely. And why do you think that this government are so keen to hand over the Chagos Islands? What is their motivation, do you think, Mr. Mandarin?
For me, what I read about this surrender deal where our Prime Minister, best friend, Philip Sands, they used to be working together, and the ideology of colonialism and reparation, all that, is something for me, is not human rights. Human rights, you have to come to see the people, get the people consulted, because the people suffered in the first place about their islands. So for me, doing this deal is all about self-pride and self-prowess.
You've said that you will pay with your life. Are you afraid of what may happen to you?
I won't tell you. It's a kind of yes, I'm frightened because I got a family, I got a daughter, I got a son who's depend on me. But the sense of belongings, where you from, is something fundamental. If I don't do this sacrifice for the future generation of Chagosian people, for my children as well, so what their future in this world?
So you would sacrifice seeing your children again to save those islands, Mr. Mandarin?
I done it already. I came.
Yeah.
When I got the call, I left everything. I left my job, I left my apartment, I left my children, and I'm here. This is the biggest sacrifice of my life. And now, God willing, that one day, in a very, very soon future, my children can come and live here and join me.
Do you think that your battle to keep the islands British will be a long and protracted one, or do you think this can be resolved quickly?
This could be resolved in seconds if our Prime Minister just said, okay, we're going to drop the treaty, we're going to look after the British Chagosian and resettle Chagosian who've been without home for more than 50 years. And that is the end of it. And it's a win-win situation for every party. It's a win situation for the British taxpayers people. So we save £30 billion. It's a win-win security for the US. The base is still British. It's a win-win situation for the global security as well. When the island is still British and British sovereignty with a US military base on it, and with the partnership between US and the UK, everybody wins.
Lastly, Mr. Mandarin, what is your message to the Prime Minister? Would you like to tell us on Talk Breakfast what you would personally like to say to the Prime Minister? If he's watching now, what is your message?
And I say to the Prime Minister, as a father like me, right, my children never set foot on this island in their homeland. Look behind me, is their grandfather. Never say it. Stop that treaty and resettle British Chagosian on British territory, Chagos Islands.
Mr. Mandarin, more power to you. We salute your courage, your bravery, your conviction. I wish you and your father, and I believe the other two people that are with you, all the best for your safety and for a resolution of this issue. And we're going to stay on this story, and we are not going to fall silent on the fate of the Chagosians and the importance of its status as British sovereign territory. Mr. Mandarin, we will speak to you very shortly again on Talk, and thank you very much for your time. 7:27, this is Talk Breakfast.
Join me, Ian Collins, every weekday from 1.
My 12-year-old. Obviously, he won't be 12 then, he'll be 16, but if he's anything like he is now, he shouldn't be anywhere near an election booth. Do you sympathise with him? Is he the victim of the 24-hour news cycle we just spoke of?
I think his failings are internal. He's useless, incompetent, has no political judgment.
Everything you need to know. All the breaking news right here on Talk.
Weekday afternoons from 1 o'clock. Only at the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, you're listening to Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan in for Jeremy Kyle all this week. Thank you for your calls, your texts, your voice notes. This from Danny, who says, good morning, Mark. Great show as always. The man speaking to you from the Chagos Islands has more patriotic values about his island than PM Pinocchio does about his own British Isles. Hats off to them for standing up. Keep fighting, says Danny. Well, let's get reaction to this now. Can the Chagos Islands giveaway be prevented as Donald Trump slams Surrender Starmer? Let's speak to Alicia Kearns, who is the Shadow National Security Minister. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. I don't know if you caught any of my conversation with the acting First Minister of the Chagosian Islands. He's not a happy man. He will pay with his life to keep those islands British.
Look, I've had the privilege of meeting with him and with many Chagosians over the last few years, because when I was chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I made it my business to make sure that we tried to right the wrongs of the past in terms of how the Chagosian people have been discarded and ignored by the British government. And unfortunately, what we saw with the new Labour government, despite the promises they made in opposition, was that David Lammy didn't once meet with the Chagosians while he was Foreign Secretary and while he was conducting these negotiations. And then other ministers didn't meet with them until after the deal had been done. So it's no surprise that they feel they have no choice but to do something extreme, because they have been ignored and they have been treated appallingly by this government, who used them, let's not forget, as a propaganda tool when they were in opposition.
And let's not forget it was a Labour government that evicted the Chagosians in the first place in the 1960s.
Absolutely. And look, my committee, when I was chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, spent a lot of time looking at this. We should be supporting the Chagosians to go home to the British Indian Overseas Territories. We should be protecting Diego Garcia. Those two things are not at odds with each other. But the idea that Mauritius is a good partner in all of this, their treatment of the Chagosian people has been absolutely appalling. Things like passing laws where even if you said that Diego Garcia and Biot belonged to anyone other than Mauritians, you could end up in jail. So this government has completely failed the Chagosians, and they have completely failed the British people, because they are giving away sovereign territory. No, worse, they are paying to give away British sovereign territory, and it will make us weaker and more vulnerable.
Mauritius has never owned the Chagos Islands. No. They expressed an interest to claim on the islands in the 1960s, barely mentioned it for decades, and became interested again following closer economic ties with China.
Yes, I mean, the entirety of this deal is historically illiterate. I stood up in Parliament and said that when they first published the first deeds of the deal. Historically illiterate. It has never been Mauritius's territory. But also the entire fundamental of this is completely wrong. So UNCLOS, which is the UN essentially article around the seas, actually has a specific exemption where it says that legal nonsense or legal trials cannot be used where there is military interest. So the specific article is Article 298, and it says military events and military land should not be subject to rulings. So the government told us that there were weeks, only weeks, in which Diego Garcia could continue operating before we'd face legal challenge and have to stop. I think that their ministers have some serious questions to answer in Parliament about whether or not they misled us, because it looks at this point like they most certainly did, and also misled the British people.
Alicia Kearns, you've been very strong on this as Shadow National Security Minister. Do you regret that it was the Conservatives in government who began negotiations about a possible deal over Chagos?
So I've been very strong on this since the moment I was elected, and you look at all the speeches I gave when we were in government over the last few years, where I was very clear that this should never, ever happen. But let's be very clear, pressure was put on us by other parties to make sure that Diego Garcia, that essentially use of it, could continue no matter what. James Cleverly, as Foreign Secretary, said, I am not going to do a deal on this because there is no good deal to be had. Conversations were had, absolutely, there were negotiation rounds, but he said, I'm not going to sign away our sovereignty. He had specific red lines, and those could never, ever, ever be agreed to. And that's why we didn't do a deal, because when Labour came in, look how quickly they did a deal. And the reason they did it so quickly was they did not set red lines. They were willing to agree at any cost. David Cameron, James Cleverly were both very clear. They were not going to sign away territory, and they were not going to do a deal at any cost. And that is the difference. They stood firm and said, we are not going to do this.
Well, on the 3rd of November 2022, the Conservative Foreign Secretary at the time, James Cleverly, announced that the UK and Mauritius had agreed to begin negotiations over the exercise of sovereignty of the British Indian Ocean Territory, the Chagos Islands. Why did those negotiations begin in the first place?
So they explored those negotiations because there were concerns expressed by certain allies that essentially we could not maintain Diego Garcia and protect those military events and activities. That was then proven through the negotiations to be impossible to reach a different deal. Look, we were very open in government. If it needs to have a different deal, we are open to having it, and we will have those conversations with Mauritius to make sure we protect the operations base. But as those negotiations went on, it became very clear that any of our red lines, well, essentially we would have to breach all of our red lines if we were to proceed. So yes, we did have the dialogue. Yes, we did have the discussions. We were asked to have those discussions because I can tell you now, I spent a lot of time over in DC telling Americans that this was not a good idea and we shouldn't be doing it. And essentially they agreed, and that is why the foreign secretaries did not reach an agreement. That is why they refused to progress the deal. But yes, there were discussions, and those discussions were had to explore whether or not a deal was needed.
Alicia Kearns, what chance that this Chagos Islands giveaway can be thwarted?
Look, there is every opportunity. Labour MPs need to speak to their whips. They need to speak to the Foreign Secretary and say, enough is enough. You are costing our country with every single decision you make. This is one decision that they can reverse now, that they can say no to.
What does your gut say, Alicia? Do you think that this will be scrapped? Will this be a rare, welcome Labour U-turn? What do you think is the percentage chance that we keep the Chagos Islands British?
If I'm honest, my heart doesn't tell me that we have much hope, but I will continue to make the case, as I have since the moment I was elected.
Now, of course, briefly, Alicia Kearns, military spending hasn't just declined under Labour. It happened whilst the Conservatives were in power as well, going back to the austerity years. I'm sure you regret that. We can all agree that we must support our military financially. Do you sign up to this suggestion of 5% of GDP spending on defence, which, of course, is a letter that's gone to the government? Lots of ex-military chiefs want to see us go to 5%. Do you back that figure?
So look, over the last few years, I've always said, and I maintain this entirely, I'm not interested in a specific figure. I'll come to our official position in a moment. I'm not interested in a specific figure. I'm interested in what capabilities we have and what support we're able to give to our armed forces. We have said that we think that that is 3% at this moment in time. Will I, of course, look at the conversations and advice of military chiefs? Yes, I will. But I want to know, what does that 2% difference that they are arguing, specifically, what outcomes and effects does it deliver? I'm not interested in vague discussions around percent. I want specifics. This extra 2% they're arguing, what will it deliver? Forgive me. What will it deliver? Why? And in what timeline? That is what the focus of these conversations should be, rather than becoming too obsessed with a minimum target. But we've said at least 3% because we think that is what is required to get to what is needed for the current threat.
A pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for your valuable time. Alicia Kearns is the Shadow National Security Minister. A major royal headache as the bad headlines keep coming for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Could the former Duke of York face jail? Let's get the views of the world-renowned royal expert and broadcaster Kinsey Schofield, host of Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered. Good morning, Kinsey.
Hi, Mark. You're absolutely right. I mean, in these new reports that are coming out, asking questions about retaliatory actions. One royal protection officer, royal protection officers fearing for their jobs. One specific instance was that a royal protection officer, we don't know which member of the British royal family, but they were reported for speeding. That royal protection officer demoted, thrown back in a suit, thrown back on the streets. So, you know, these are very damaging reports about the elites protecting each other. And this is exactly what's been upsetting our audiences for the last few weeks.
Well, you know how the royal family works. You know about Buckingham Palace, those royal properties. If young women were flown into the UK, if they were trafficked, and of course Andrew denies all of these allegations, but if Epstein was shipping young women in for the pleasure of Andrew, and if things were happening on royal property, you don't just wander into Buckingham Palace, do you? There will be security checks. There will be a log of who comes in and who goes out. Bodyguards, butlers, courtiers, undergardeners, the firm, the management of the royal family must have known something.
To your point, it's my understanding that Prince Harry complained about the last time he visited his dad, that he had to go through some of those security checkpoints. He thought, as a member of the family, he was above that. So yes, those security checks are very extensive and perhaps annoying. But that's exactly what is being reported, that British authorities are now treating the material emerging from the Epstein files with this renewed seriousness. There's 9 separate police forces across the UK assessing evidence as part of a coordinated national review. Among the matters under scrutiny, roughly 90 private jet arrivals into London Stansted Airport linked to an aircraft owned by Jeffrey Epstein. A number of those flights, Mark, occurring even after his 2008 imprisonment in the United States for being a convicted sex offender. And then in this Epstein file dump, we see him saying, do you want this cute Russian? She's 26. I mean, they're talking about the exchange or the introduction of women.
It's pretty wild. Now, the Mail are running some very concerning stories around the Andrew allegations. The Met Police is examining claims that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's royal protection officers were aware of visits to Jeffrey Epstein's private island by the former Duke of York. Did the bodyguards turn a blind eye?
Well, I think we're going to find out that information, and that is certainly what was said on LBC this week, that members of the Royalty and Specialist Protection Command may have ignored what was happening around them on Epstein Island, despite traveling with Andrew to the island at least once aboard Epstein's jet. I mean, if even part of that proves true, this isn't about one, disgraced royal anymore. It raises the far more serious possibility of a culture inside elite protection units where people were too compromised or too intimidated to speak up. That's not a minor procedural lapse. That's a systematic failure with very serious implications.
I'm sympathetic to some of these bodyguards, Kinsey, because they've got jobs, they've got lives, they've got careers, they've got mortgages. They were on the royal payroll, effectively. These are people that are not independently wealthy, who are going to whistleblow, who are going to give up a career as a close protection officer. On the other hand, if King Charles had even a flavour of what Andrew was up to, there's a big problem.
And I think it's fair for you to say that because, again, LBC is reporting that there were individuals that were fearful for their jobs because they watched their co-workers be demoted when they stood up to members of the British royal family. So I think I understand where you're coming from there. I agree with Robert Jobson that you and I've discussed this before, that, this reminds us of when Diana died and Queen Elizabeth was at Balmoral. But how did she rectify that? She stood in front of a camera, live in front of the world, with the doors open. And, you felt like you were connecting with her. You felt like she was attainable. And she explained to the world what was going on. And I think that King Charles needs to do the same. I think he needs to say, I was unaware. I will do everything in my power to work with the authorities to ensure that if anything did happen, those responsible are held accountable. Otherwise, I think people are really disappointed in the monarchy right now.
There's another issue, and this is about governance, Kinsey, because let's imagine you're the CEO of an oil company and there is an explosion at an oil refinery, and let's say that millions of litres of crude oil are going into the sea, right? An accident happens, someone's made a mistake on an oil rig. Well, the CEO stands down, don't they? They're not responsible for the leak, but they are at the top, and that's what accountability looks like in a corporate environment. Same in politics. Head of a department, Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, something happens on their watch, they normally fall on their sword. So are there implications for the King's position as the monarch of this country that he may not have known what was going on. But if the firm at which he's the head covered anything up, then he goes.
Well, constitutionally, no. I mean, if we are being honest, we are expected to believe that these individuals are anointed by God, that God made them more important than we are. And that's why they're in the position that they are in, and we're in the positions we're in, you know, busting our butts to put gas in our cars and paying our rent and working multiple jobs. So constitutionally, no, we should not expect that to take place. But I do completely get what you're saying.
Well, indeed, and we have the Constitution, but Kinsey, Constitution, Constimution, because the bottom line is that it was against royal protocol to drop the flag to half-mast after Diana died, and the Queen resisted for a few days and had to relent. So when there's enough political and public pressure, those traditions, those rules go out the window.
But you're there and I'm not there. This story, I think, is much bigger where you are. So maybe you're seeing that pressure that we're not seeing here in the States. I mean, we've got the Clintons and, you know, we've got all of these other sinister characters that are trying to navigate this Epstein fallout that are really our focus. So maybe you're seeing something I'm not.
Let's just get our crystal balls out and let's be vindicated in a few years' time, Kinsey. What are the percentage chances that this unseats Charles as King of the United Kingdom?
I don't think that this will unseat King Charles. I think he's going to try to stay exactly where he is. And even if he has to humiliatingly beg the public for forgiveness, I think that that's something he'd be willing to do to save his position.
I tend to agree. I think what will happen is he'll become a lamed up king and then we'll be waiting for the reign of William and then we can have a full reboot. And I know that you'll have ringside seats for that. Kinsey, we love having you on the show. I'm delighted to say that I was the first person in this country to put Kinsey Schofield on the national radio and television airwaves, and by God, what a good decision that was. 7:46, Talk Breakfast, more to come.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
.47, you're listening to Talk Breakfast. Lovely to have your company on a Thursday. Breaking this morning, Donald Trump slams surrender Starmer. Can the Chagos Islands giveaway be prevented? And also, another very big story, a very important story, front page of the Telegraph newspaper. Ex-army chiefs, number 10, dishonest on defence. Sir Keir Starmer is not being straight with the public over defence spending, former military chiefs have claimed. In an open letter drafted by a senior producer here at Talk, Ted Jeffrey, retired heads of the Army and Navy and an ex-MI6 boss warned the Prime Minister that the armed forces had been hollowed out by years of chronic underfunding. And they're proposing a 5% of GDP investment in our armed services. One of the signatories to that letter is a true British military hero, Simon Weston, CBE. Simon, top of the morning to you. Welcome to Talk Breakfast.
Good morning, Mark.
It's always such a treat to have you on the programme, always such a treat to see you again. Why have you signed this letter?
Because these are somebody's boys, somebody's daughters, somebody's husbands, uncles, aunties. Our service people are very important. You know, we're struggling to protect our own borders when internally.
Yeah.
But how are we supposed to protect them externally in conflicts when our guys they're disappearing. We're struggling to recruit. We're struggling to get the right equipment. We had the vehicle that was causing real problems, the Ajax, I think it's called. There's real problems with that. We need the investment. You'll never bring a war in under budget. It's always going to cost more than people ever thought. But these people's lives matter. Their families matter. And if we're going to talk about it later on when people are dying in service, then it's all too late. You know, we did have this thing where we had an issue kit just in time when we first went to Iraq many, many years ago, when the first Gulf War happened. And people were dying because they hadn't issued the right ceramic plates for the body armor. Because somebody said, there was a story I heard, said that it was on my signature, so I wasn't going to issue them. But then, you know, what were they going to do? Put the signature on the coffin. You know, the fact of the matter is these people matter. They're so extremely well trained. They're so professional, the men and women, and they deserve to have the best equipment, the best investment, and the only way you can do that. But, you know, they also deserve better pay as well, because the pay is abysmal. You know, when you consider what they do, the hours they work, the awkward hours they work, you know, people will say, oh, well, you joined the military. But at the end of the day, it's a career. But without them, we would all struggle. So don't just come up with the trite answers, oh, well, you joined a career. These people matter, and it costs what it costs. And you can't, it's like not paying your mortgage. You struggle to actually get back around to paying it properly in the end. So do it properly now, and then there's no complaints. You know, we have a complete catalogue of politicians who've said, yes, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
We plan to do this by 2030, 2035. They're never going to be in power at that point in time, whoever it is. So it's just a failed mealy-mouthed project that they never intended to follow through on in the end. Do it before body bags get filled. Do it before we commit to something really massive. You know, the Prime Minister's committed us to go into Ukraine. You know, where are we going to find the people?
Well, I totally agree. We tooled up very rapidly during the COVID-19 pandemic with Nightingale hospitals, the lockdowns. It seemed like at that point it was money, no object for something that, in my view, Simon, was a much lesser threat than the one we face now. I want to ask you, in the United States, Simon, you got military veterans who get a round of applause when they're on an aeroplane. They get seats given up for them on the train. They are hero worshipped by the American public. I just look at our political establishment, our media establishment, and even our wider society seems not to appreciate those that fight for this country here in Britain.
I'm sorry to say that I'm sure there are plenty of individuals within the political circles who do care. And I know several that do and are ardent about that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it seems that we only ever see politicians really around the military when it's a good photo opportunity or it's Remembrance Sunday.
Yeah.
Other than that, they don't seem to.
Their warm words are empty if it's not backed up with investment, is it, Simon? And as you said, the kit's not there, the equipment's not there, the wages that they deserve are not there, they're underpaid. Everyone else in the public sector gets a pay rise, Simon. Even people on benefits get a pay rise, but not our soldiers.
Unfortunately, the British Army or the British military don't come into that R factor. They're not pink and cuddly. You know, there's that, you know, you can't wrap them up in furry blankets and make them look cuddly to somebody. It's not like they're giving out kittens. You know, their job is one of aggression at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it's hard to make that pink and cuddly, but they can't join a union either. So, you know, when you look at all the other people who can join a union, work to sort of time and record, British military can't do that. So they've got no leverage. The only leverage that people do have is, am I going to bother going to fight for my country or not? And as we've seen all the surveys that have come out over the last few months, most of the younger generation wouldn't even consider it. And is that a reflection on the way that we are being led or not, as the case may be?
Simon, you're not just a war hero, you are a war victor. having served in the successful Falklands War in order to retain British sovereign territory, we salute you and your colleagues for your bravery, your courage, what you've been through physically and mentally as a result of your injuries in the Falklands War. Here you are now, fighting the good fight for military investment. Before I let you go, Simon, can I ask you why you think the Chagos Islands should stay British?
Oh, my goodness, where do we begin? I don't understand. I mean, maybe somebody could explain it to me in black and white, but nobody's come on TV yet and explained it to any of us. Why we are paying somebody to take something off us that we already owned. The Chagosians have their own case that they're trying to fight, but even President Trump this morning has come out and said this is a crazy deal, even though the government were lauding a so-called statement that Mr. Trump was allegedly supposed to have said, where he said he agrees with the Chagos Islands being handed over. It just makes absolutely no sense. And especially when you see that Mauritius are going to be able to wipe out any income tax for the foreseeable future for their own citizens, which we are going to be paying for.
They're clearing their national debt. Make it make sense. Simon, it's always a deep privilege to have you on the show. And Christian, can we please invite Simon to come on regularly, because he's such an important voice and he is a true Great Britain. Simon, we'll catch up very soon. We really appreciate your time on Talk Breakfast. Simon Weston, CBE, British Army veteran, and a signatory to a letter to the government saying get defence spending up to 5%. Simon Weston, I think surely the best known soldier in the country, and for such good reason a man of courage that's been through physical and mental hell in order to fight for this country. So much more to get through. This is Talk Breakfast.
This is the Political Asylum, current affairs, international news, letting criminals off while sending... Oi! Oi! You shut up! I'm trying to record something.
Stand by for 3 powerhouse hours of breaking news, challenging views.
I don't give a flying damn about international law. I think people will viscerally reject this.
We're with you every weekday night, Monday to Friday, 7 until 10 p.m, right here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, you're listening to Talk Breakfast, and the response to our conversation around the Chagos Islands giveaway is explosive. I've got to say, I've got a full message board, a full switchboard as well. Roger says, good morning, Mark. Donald Trump probably didn't grasp the Chagos deal at first. because he may have thought that no one would be mad enough to hand over British sovereignty and pay billions for the pleasure, then lease it back at £100 million a year for 100 years. As Isabel, your guest, said, it is bonkers. Well, breaking this morning, Trump slams surrender Starmer. Can the Chagos Islands giveaway be prevented? And would you be willing to pay higher taxes to support our military? Let me know your thoughts. It's all about your opinions. This is Talk Breakfast.
Labour MP, they say, listen, Keir, your position is untenable. This is all about appointing that rat, Peter Mandelson.
We've now had another resignation from number 10. The plot is thickening, the noose is tightening.
His failings are internal. He's useless, incompetent, has no political judgment.
This is all part of Starmer's reset, getting rid of his inner circle. So Chris Wormold, we think fairly reluctantly, has stepped down.
What an absolutely crazy week for Keir Starmer. His second cabinet secretary, gone. His third chief of staff, gone. His fourth director of communications, gone.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Coming up to 3 minutes past 8. You're listening to Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan in for Jeremy Kyle for the entirety of this week. And breaking this morning, Trump slams surrender Starmer. Can the Chagos Islands giveaway be prevented? Meanwhile, the BBC admit that the grooming gangs are in London too. Will the mayor get the memo? And Reform's effective Shadow Chancellor Robert Jenrick made a keynote speech yesterday. Can Reform UK fix the British economy? So my priority for the next 2 hours is to get your opinions on the national radio and television airwaves. My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Damien's on the phones today. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note. And as the saying goes, let's talk. Now, earlier in the programme, we spoke to the acting effective First Minister of the Chagos Islands, a very brave man that's actually flown to the Chagos Islands with 3 others, including his elderly father, to protest this giveaway of our sovereign territory. Misli Mandarin, who said, "I will die for my island." Well, let's get reaction from one of my favourite political commentators, Conservative peer and former advisor to the UK Board of Trade, Lord Daniel Hannan. Daniel, welcome to Talk Breakfast.
Good morning, Mark.
The million-dollar question, Daniel, is why is this happening? Why are the government doing this at great cost and with national security implications?
And having already paid Mauritius in 1965 to renounce all claims in perpetuity, and handing over the world's most pristine maritime conservation zone to a country with a terrible record on biodiversity, and betraying a poor, black, dispossessed population, which I don't think many Labour MPs went into politics to do. By the way, Misley Mandarin, who you just had on, didn't fly there. He went through the most harrowing journey to get there, I think via Sri Lanka, so as not to trigger the alerts and so as to be able to land there.
Wow.
We're now in this extraordinary position of a Labour government which is unable to stop small boats in the Channel trying to enforce an eviction order on a British subject on British territory. So, look, I mean, the million-dollar question of why, honestly, I think plenty of Labour politicians and Lib Dems are asking that question as well. This is not just a Conservative and Reform issue. Other than Keir Starmer, Philippe Sands, who was working for Mauritius, Peter Mandelson, Vijay Rangarajan in the Foreign Office, Jonathan Powell, and of course Richard Hermer, the Attorney General, I don't think you'll find anyone who supports it. It's this obsession of a tiny number of wokies.
It seems to be, and you could follow the money. There is a pot of cash that will be shared as a result of these negotiations with Mauritius. Several of Keir Starmer's closest allies will profit from this giveaway. Is it ideological too? Is it some kind of misguided apology for our colonial past, Daniel?
I think that's how a lot of people initially saw it, yes. You're quite right. It began as a Matrix Chambers Doughty Street obsession, a dislike of flags that have little Union Jacks in the corner. And I think when a lot of people first heard that we were giving the Chagos Islands away, they understood that it was some kind of restitution. They thought we were giving it back to the original inhabitants, who of course were indeed very badly treated in the late 60s and early 70s when they were evicted. As it became clear that the Chagosians did not want it to be handed over to Mauritius, a country that had never run or governed the islands, they were kind of on a hook, because by then their government was advanced in the talks, the treaty had been signed. I and my fellow Conservative peers have been fighting a rearguard action to try and slow this up. We never had the numbers to stop it, but lots and lots of people, particularly Conservative and Reform colleagues, have been pulling every lever and pressing every button they had in Washington, D.C. to say, just look at the implications of this thing. How can a lease be more secure than a freehold? Even if we set aside the insanity that we're paying to lease back what we currently own. And I think once that argument begins to be addressed on its own merits, it's very, very hard to carry on pushing for this surrender.
Indeed, and as a real estate man, Donald Trump knows the poor value of a lease as opposed to actually owning land. Are you disappointed, though, Daniel, by the extent to which the president has prevaricated on this issue? He was against it, then he was for it. Last 24 hours, he blasts it again.
And for that reason, even now, it's not in the bag, and we shouldn't stop campaigning. He is volatile. He's a very mercurial president. It's very difficult to know what he's going to do next. I would just say, as an aside, that the worst possible take on the whole thing, prize for the worst take this morning, was from Ed Davey saying, this just shows we need to get closer to the EU on defence. The EU, unlike the current US administration, has been incredibly unhelpful on the Chagos Islands, but more to the point, when we were offering to defend them, to participate in their defence fund, it's not us who are directly threatened by Russia, we're not the ones on the front line. The EU was the one that was difficult, obstreperous and hostile. They said to Canada, you guys can come in for 10 million euros. They said to us, if you want to participate, that'll be 6 billion. This is not a potential partner that is serious about working together.
And why have the progressive left ignored these black islanders?
Because they are the wrong kind of black islanders. They're very loyal to the crown. They're very loyal to
they're patriotic. So in a way, they're not proper black people then, are they?
I mean, I doubt they would quite verbalise the thought to themselves in that way, but I think that must have been at the back of their minds.
Do you remember Daniel, that Labour MP, I think it was Rupert Huck, who said that Kwasi Kwarteng on the radio didn't sound like a black man because he was extolling conservative economic ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is kind of what bothers them. That Misley, as you showed, I think on your programme yesterday, lands on the islands and says, "God save the King." I mean, that, I think, just triggers a few of these human rights lawyer types. It fills them with ideas of imperial domination and all that. I mean, the reality is the only places still under the British Crown are the places that did not want to be pushed out. And in some cases, we tried to push them out unsuccessfully, right? So this is you'd think, a basic issue of self-determination. Now what I hope happens is that we settle some of the outer atolls. If we can hold on to these islands, we should allow Misley and his family, and such of his people as want to go back. They accept that Diego Garcia is off limits. They don't want to go back to where the base is. They understand.
They support Diego Garcia being a military base. It's good for their economy.
Yes, they do. And they want to go back to some of the outer atolls. They would then be a ready-made and secure and British workforce to do all the jobs on the base, the non-military jobs that every base needs, the cooks and the cleaners and the other contractors. And of course, the islands would then be inhabited, which would put the whole question of sovereignty beyond dispute. It would be like the Falklands or Gibraltar or whatever. There would then be a people with a right to self-determination. And do you know the awful thing about this, Mark? The UK looked 15 or 20 years ago at resettling the islands. They commissioned a big accountancy firm to do a feasibility study, and that study came back and said, well, it depends how many people went back, but it tops about 3 or 4 billion if there was a large settlement. I mean, that's a tenth of what we're handing to Mauritius, just giving away, right? So I hope that on the back of this, if indeed Trump sticks to his guns and the deal is sunk, that we will now look at a proper and habitable community on Perros Banhos and some of the other atolls with the medical facilities, the electricity generation, the schools and what you'd need there. This should be the jewel in our crown. It's the Malta of the Indian Ocean. It's the most strategically situated base in that whole region, and we should be cherishing it and nurturing it and allowing the people who traditionally were the only indigenous population for 200 years, we should let them go back, tend the graves of their fathers, and live there as British subjects under the Crown.
Call me old-fashioned, Daniel, but is it a red flag that China want this deal and the United States do not?
I mean, this all comes down to whether China is going to be able to lease one of the neighbouring islands. Now, in theory, the deal has an exclusion zone and we get a veto on military installations. But the one thing we know about China, which is turning every reef and every atoll into a runway and a military installation, is that they never call it a military installation, right? All of those islands that are being magicked up in the South China Sea and turned into great bristling Chinese air bases, all of them are notionally being used for civilian purposes. So a future Mauritian government that wanted to make money, and Mauritius's only interest in this archipelago is monetary. They've never had any national interest in it. They don't regard it as part of their country. They see it purely as a cash cow. Any future government that wanted to make more money would lease, I suspect, a neighbouring island for supposedly civilian use so that it wouldn't trigger the treaty. And of course, that would then open the door to having Chinese listening posts and whatnot.
That's a real concern. As per your excellent piece in The Telegraph, you mentioned the KPMG study into the viability of installing Chagosians back on the islands. And you mentioned a couple of billion at one point. I think in your article you quoted maybe 400 million. Well, I spoke to the acting First Minister of the Chagosian Islands, Misley Mandarin, earlier today, and he said actually even a few million would have made the islands viable for a small population. If it was, let's say, 400 million all the way back in 2014, well, that's about the cost of the Erasmus scheme that this government have reintroduced, which will benefit citizens of the EU far more than my viewers and listeners here in the UK.
Yes, I mean, in the mood of austerity at the time, that was considered excessive. Actually, that was one of the most short-sighted decisions. The number, I used to represent Crawley as part of my Euro constituency. I had most of the Chagosian population. I think I probably represented more Chagosians than anyone else. Most of them will not want to go home. They've been living here for decades now. So that the cost would depend on how many decided to make the return journey. And they are, let's be honest about this, they are very remote islands and it will be expensive to maintain a settlement there. However, it will in time become more and more viable. There are lots and lots of things that could happen there. I think there will be a lot of universities that will be interested in studying the extraordinary marine fauna there. We could have place for students to come and live. There's technologies for taking the plastics out of the ocean that would be very well cited there. We could have installations that look at marine navigation and marine rescue there. There's a lot of things that I don't know what they all are, right? I mean, the one thing I know is that politicians shouldn't dictate what the market would do, but we shouldn't think of this as a permanent drain on our resources. Having set it up, especially with the base there providing employment, there is every reason to hope that over time a Chagosian community in the archipelago would become more economically self-sufficient.
Daniel, there's a theme emerging here. The Chinese super embassy in London, net zero, open borders. Britain's story is becoming a story of surrender and of retreat.
Just as the rest of the world has given up on that order. I mean, we are the only people in the world still tearing around, trying to find one last international court to surrender to. And I don't know about you, Mark, but when I saw those eviction notices being served on Misley and his father and the other Chagosians yesterday, I thought, this is the practical impact of being governed by human rights lawyers. Human rights law can be incredibly unjust and inhumane in its effects. We've maneuvered ourselves into this situation where come here illegally and the courts will barely budge, and you know there's almost no effort to evict you, but a Brit going to British territory and we snap into action. And there is something deeply disquieting about that where the one country, as you say, flagellating over net zero or whatever it is, when the rest of the world has moved on. There might have been a perfectly good argument about decarbonisation if the whole world was doing it together. There's really no argument for doing it if it's purely symbolic, if nobody is following us. And yet, in the minds of these kind of virtue signalling human rights types, that's all that matters, just being seen to have done the right thing, even if there is zero practical outcome, or rather, if the practical outcomes are negative. And of course, that's no way to govern a country.
Daniel, two quick ones before we let you go. We know you've got a packed schedule this morning. In an open letter, retired heads of the Army and Navy and the ex-boss of MI6 have warned the Prime Minister that the armed forces have been hollowed out by years of chronic underfunding. They're suggesting a target of 5% of GDP for military investment. The country's facing major financial challenges. Is this affordable? What's your reaction to this letter?
We need growth, right? It doesn't matter whether you spend 2, 3, 5 or 10% of GDP on defence if GDP is not growing. And in per capita terms, GDP has been static really since lockdown, right? Because so much of our population is now dependent on the government, either working for it or claiming benefits. And that's what we need to tackle. If you want a strong defence, you need economic growth. And that means deregulation, it means free trade, cutting tariffs, it means shifting people from welfare into work, and above all, it means cutting spending and cutting taxes. And I mean, I think Starmer came to office promising some of those things, but of course he's given up on all of them now because he's a prisoner of his left-wing backbenchers.
And finally, Daniel, you've written quite recently that there's not too much of an ideological difference between Reform UK and the Conservatives. But has Nigel Farage now won the battle for the political right?
I don't think either Reform or the Conservatives is likely to win a majority on their own. Certainly not the kind of mandate that we will need to do all the things that need to be done. Although I think our manifestos will be very similar. I mean, if you read out sections of the two of them, Mark, on your programme, your listeners would struggle by the next election to guess which was which.
Particularly given that Kemi's taken the party to the right, which is a welcome move.
Right. I think a lot of my Reform friends, when they complain about the Conservatives, are complaining about things in the past more than about things in the present. But do you know, this Chagos row shows what we can achieve when we work together. I mean, all credit to my friends in Reform who were campaigning on this. Nigel using his extraordinarily good contacts in Washington. Adam Holloway, God bless him, who organised and masterminded that mission and is there now in Perros Baños in the Chagos Islands, having steered the Chagosians there. Former Conservative MP, now Reform. And my colleagues in the House of Lords, particularly Lord Callanan, who unknown to the public, has been the guy who's been playing these brilliant delaying tactics so that we can keep the thing going. We can achieve great things when we work together, and I hope that by the next election, people will understand that given the severity of our crisis and the need to get order and sanity back in our public finances, it would be egotistical for two parties with broadly similar solutions to bicker with each other rather than putting the country first.
Daniel, a deep pleasure to have you on the programme. Thank you for your time. Lord Daniel Hannan, Conservative peer and former advisor to the UK Board of Trade. Here's a voice note from Carl on the Chagos Islands giveaway.
Hi Mark, Carl from Coventry here. Just wondering, where are all the human rights lawyers waiting to queuing up to represent these people in the Chagos Islands? Where are they? They're quick enough to represent people coming over from France. Thank you. Bye.
Carl, I mean, this is the point, right? There's a theme from the viewers and listeners to this show, which is that you've got British Chagosians being evicted from their island, right? The forces, you know, they will remove these 4 islanders at some point, and yet we cannot get rid of the best part of 70,000 people that have landed on our shores since Sir Keir Smash the Gang's Starmer entered number 10. So much more to come. 8:20 Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
.23, you're listening to Talk Breakfast. The Chagos giveaway, can it be prevented? Free! The Chagos 4, nice line there from my colleague Cal. Good morning, Mark, says Neil in Stoke-on-Trent. I wonder if the Chagos deal gets pulled, how long it will be before the ECHR lawyers get their claws into us and put a claim in for breach of contract. Well, yes, Neil, I think that if a future administration tries to do anything that's right for this country, such as deporting foreign criminals or closing our borders or scrapping net zero, there will be lawyers in this country working at odds with and against an elected administration. And it's worse than that, because it's not just the lawyers, folks, it is the civil servants. Let's take a voice note from Perry on net zero.
Morning, Mark. With the Conservatives constant chasing after net zero and then this government just going hell for leather, step back, step back, step back. We have finally got someone that's made a step forward, and I've got to say I'm quite happy this morning that Vauxhall have announced they will be making diesel cars and vans again. It's a step forward. It's great news. I'm not a Vauxhall man, but I'd rather have a Vauxhall than an electric.
Perry, you're absolutely right about that. And I was reading in the paper over the weekend, Perry, that the owner of Vauxhall has written off, wait for this, Christian, 19 billion quid's worth of losses as a result of their investment in electric cars. They're bringing back diesels. You couldn't make it up. Do you know what I'm going to do when the budget allows? I'm going to buy a Hummer just to annoy Ed Miliband. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive the Hummer into Talk Towers every morning. I'm going to park between Alan Brazil's Rolls-Royce and Julia's Bentley, and I'm just going to be slam in the middle of the two of them in my Hummer. I couldn't care less. Ross Clark is a brilliant journalist, a columnist at the Sun newspaper. And Ross, happy to see you. Interesting, that development, that Vauxhall will start making diesels again. Can we read into this that common sense is starting to prevail?
Yeah, well, I think it's becoming clear, isn't it, that electric vehicles, along with heat pumps, by the way, are just simply not as flexible or cost-effective as the technologies they're trying to replace. And they only sell at all because they've got massive public subsidies behind them. And as soon as government sort of pulled back that EV subsidy, then sales fell as well. They're simply not selling themselves. And, for good reasons, if you want to drive a long distance, it's still very impractical in an electric car. You've got to find somewhere to charge. I drive up to Scotland a few times a year, and I worked out if I had an electric vehicle, I'd sort of have to stop about 7 times to recharge it. Well, it's just simply not practical, and on many of those occasions there'd be just like one charger that I was relying on, and of course if it's in use or if it's broken, you're in a spot of bother.
Well, you couldn't make it up, Ross, because I mean, when I quoted that figure to you, I'm like, is that true? And I've just checked on the Times website. So Stellantis, that owns Vauxhall, and by the way, very important company for the United Kingdom because we make Vauxhalls here in the UK, they've announced a write-down of 19 billion quid as a result of this failed electric car experiment. That is an eye-watering amount of money.
Yes, and Stellantis, like several car companies really, have helped bring this upon themselves because they were all behind this thing called the zero emission vehicle mandate before it was introduced a couple of years ago. That obliges manufacturers to sell a certain proportion and rising proportion of cars, they must be electric vehicles. Stellantis was all supportive of that before it came in. Of course, then when it did come in, they suddenly realised that they weren't going to be able to meet these targets, and because consumers just simply didn't want to buy electrical vehicles in the volumes which the government decided we ought to.
Well, I think any number of administrations can fear your journalism, Ross, because you always get to the heart of the story and to the truth. Your headline in your brilliant column in The Sun today is as follows: yet again, Labour isn't working. Generation jobless. This government is in danger of producing an entire group of young people who may never work in their lives. That's a bit of a problem, isn't it, Ross? Given the fact that it was Michael Jackson, I think, that once sang that the children are our future.
Well, indeed. I mean, you might remember a couple of days ago, we had this sort of rather grim news on the jobs front that the unemployment rate had climbed to 5.2%, which is the highest since the depths of the COVID pandemic. But that rather covers up what's really happening among the young. Among 18 to 24-year-olds, that unemployment rate is 14%. If you're 16 and 17, the unemployment rate is 34%. And, you know, vast numbers of young people just simply are not getting into employment. And if they don't get into employment now, they won't develop the habit of getting up in the morning, the discipline of holding down a job, and there is a very, very high risk that they will then become unemployed for a whole lifetime. And there are a number of reasons why unemployment is so high among young people. One is the national minimum wage. Now, that was a good idea when it was first introduced by the Blair government in 1999, but it's absolutely crucial that it is set at a realistic level. Now, when it was first introduced, it was at what now the equivalent of today's money of £5.80 an hour. It's now £10 an hour. It's nearly twice what employers were having to pay 27 years ago. And, you know, the result of which, of course, is that employers don't want to employ so many 16 to 17-year-olds in particular because they're inexperienced.
And that's why they're cheap. Unfortunately, the Chancellor doesn't seem to understand that. Here's a clip from Rachel Reeves speaking about youth unemployment.
I do recognise that there are challenges, particularly around young people leaving school, college and university. The COVID generation of young people who did miss out on so much during those years. And as a government, we are determined to do everything we can to support them. For example, through more apprenticeship places, more college places, and more support to help young people find work. But at the same time, we value the fact that wages over the last year and a half have risen at a faster rate than prices, and that is something that didn't happen under the previous Conservative government.
Now, Ross, I find the Chancellor and the Prime Minister incredibly disingenuous because they have warm words about the cost of living, warm words about the cost of energy and our bills. They've got warm words about growing unemployment, and they've got warm words about the low growth and how they're going to grow the economy. But they're responsible. It's their policies that are causing this.
Well, absolutely. And you heard Reeves there say, he said, oh, it's a great thing that wages are rising because she's jacked up the national minimum wage. But that is part of the problem, and she doesn't seem to realise that. Also, of course, she jacked up national insurance contributions. That's particularly punishing on part-time workers because the threshold at which national insurance contributions become payable was dropped from $9,100 a year to $5,000 a year. Well, that provided a huge disincentive for employers to create part-time jobs, which in many cases are the sort of jobs in hospitality, retail and so on, which young people rely on as their first job, their first entry into employment.
Well, it's the equivalent. It's the equivalent, isn't it? They're so worried about the state of hospitality. They want a hospitality czar now, a special minister for hospitality. Ross was like, well, try not taxing pubs and giving them red tape and increasing the minimum wage. It's like a burglar feeling very bad about the fact that your house has been burgled.
Well, exactly. I mean, all she's going to do is create some flunky on a couple of $100,000 a year as their hospitality czar and so on, and while pubs, restaurants, hotels and so go to the wall.
Or they're the hospitality czar that will be doing a different Wetherspoons every night, enjoying steak Thursday and curry Tuesday.
Indeed, yes, it'd be hospitality for the hospitality czar, but for nobody else.
Our other pub groups are available. I do support your independent pub. Can we talk about the government approving a controversial solar farm in Ed Miliband's constituency, Ross?
Yes. Well, I mean, Ed wants to plaster the sort of countryside for solar power. There's a very big problem. It's taking a lot of agricultural land out of production. He says he wants to promote national energy security, but of course he's detracting from national food security. I mean, back in the mid-1980s, we produced about 85% of the food that was consumed in Britain. It's now down to 60%. And falling, and that's quite a big problem. It makes us more vulnerable to inflation because of the sort of food currency movements, which can jack up the cost of food that's imported into the country, and and what do we get in return? We get an intermittent form of energy. Now, Ed Miliband this week met up with Gavin Newsom, the governor of California.
Yikes!
Who is a prime example of why you should not have a grid that is over-reliant on solar energy. And California has become famous for blackouts in recent years, with the result that a lot of companies, energy-hungry companies, are moving to Texas, where there's more reliable energy, because what they have in California now is an electricity grid which is powered about a third of it by intermittent solar energy. And you can guess what happens. Every evening the sun goes down, but Californians don't want to go to bed instantly. They want to carry on using their air conditioning. They want to go down to restaurants, watch the movies and so on. A power demand often reaches a peak in the evening when the sun has gone down. And so this is why the Californian grid is in such problem now, and they're trying to sort of back it up with battery storage, but they had a very, very serious battery fire a year ago, which took out a huge amount of the battery storage. And that is the kind of electric grid which Ed Miliband is trying to create in Britain, one that is going to be very vulnerable to shocks, weather shocks and demand peaks and so on, because of course you cannot just turn up the sun, you cannot turn on the wind when you want the power.
And you can't store the energy generated. Ross, great piece in The Sun today. Thank you so much for joining us. Ross Clark there, whose piece about youth unemployment is damning and devastating in equal measure. Well, I want to annoy Ed Miliband. That's one of the things that I feel I was put on the earth to do. So I'd like to buy a Hummer. I might get a second-hand one, some old clunker where the engine was even dirtier, something from maybe the mid-90s. Wouldn't be bad, would it? I reckon I could pick up an old Hummer for maybe $3 or $4 grand. What do you reckon? Sean says, sorry, Mark, the new Hummer is an EV these days. Sean in Bridlington. And Mike says, Hummer, Mark, every time I light my wood-burning stove, I think of Ed Miliband. Then I sit there nice and warm, heating myself for free. Keep it coming. Folks, very, very serious, this Andrew Mountbatten Windsor story. Could it see Charles dethroned? We'll be asking the man who was responsible for Charles's security next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
8:37 Talk Breakfast. Youth unemployment the highest in Europe now, which is going some given the parlous state of both the French, Portuguese and Spanish economies. Those are all complete basket case economies. And yet we have higher youth unemployment. Pretty wild. Pete says youth unemployment is caused by the government rather than laziness. Please stop blaming kids who chase jobs and never get a reply. Pete, you're so right about that. I took a message yesterday from a listener who said that they know a kid that's graduated from university with a first in aerospace engineering that hasn't been able to get a job in that sector for 2 years. I think they're working in hospitality or something of that ilk. There's nothing wrong with that, but you don't get yourself 50 grand in debt and give up 3 years of your life to work in a supermarket. Let's take a. Have we done our voice note? I've gone mad. Let's ask you about defence. Should it go up to 5%? Are you willing to pay higher taxes or see government departments have a smaller budget so we've got proper soldiers? Take a listen to this from Phil.
Hi Mark, Phil in Nottingham here, mate. Love the show. The discussion you're having at the moment about the underfunding of the armed forces and our inability to defend ourselves. This really illustrates exactly why I will never vote Conservative again. Now, don't get me wrong, I really like Kemi Badenoch, and I think she comes across really well, competent, comes across as a strong leader, but I will never vote Conservative again because look how stripped out the country has become.
Phil, you're so right about that. There is so much anger about the Conservatives who are making all the right noises now, but they were in power for 14 years. As I said in this very studio during the pandemic, there's no point having principles if you don't govern by them, if you don't lead by them. There's no point telling me you're a Conservative and then not governing in a Conservative way. And the way that you would govern in a Conservative way is, for example, COVID. You would say to the public, here are the risks of the virus. You know, I'll allow you to judge the risk for yourself. You can go to work or not go to work. You can imprison yourself in the house for 3 years or take your chances. Now, that might sound a bit wild. Well, that's what Sweden did. Texas and Florida, they took a conservative approach. Similarly with taxes. You're not a conservative if you're responsible for the biggest tax burden since the Second World War. You're not a conservative if you back net zero. Why? Well, because it is unilateral economic and industrial disarmament. It's the most unconservative thing ever. If you're going to have a Boris wave of 1 million people in a year, that is not conservative. So I really agree with your voice note. Thank you for that. Keep it coming. Good morning, Mark, says Mark in London. Your guest, Daniel Hannan, is excellent, clear, articulate and full of common sense. The problem I have with the left and Labour voters is this. Do they follow the rhetoric and ideology blindly? Surely they must apply their own discretion and critical thinking. Well, Mark, I think the problem with a lot of the left, and I've got loads of lefty mates who have got a load of common sense and are right about plenty of things, but a lot of the left, it's like a religion. It is faith-based, which is why if you say the state is too big or we need strong borders, they think that you've committed blasphemy. That's the problem. It is an ideology, and I think, Marky boy, they do follow it blindly. Major headache for the palace officials as it's revealed that bodyguards and other members of the firm, which is the management of the royal family, may have turned a blind eye to the actions of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and his friendship with the disgraced paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. So how much did the firm know? And given the fact that the king is the CEO of the firm, should he step down if this organisation knew more than they're saying about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor? Who better to ask than the former head of Royal Protection, the man who was responsible for King Charles's safety for many years, Di Davies. Good morning, Di.
Good morning to you. Nice to be with you again, Mark.
Well, it's lovely to have you back on the programme. We've got bodyguards, we've got butlers, we've got courtiers, we've got undergardeners. There's a whole network of people that serve the royal family professionally. It's not beyond the wit of man to imagine that they might have known some of what Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was allegedly up to.
Well, I totally agree, and I've been calling this out for the police to properly investigate for nearly 6 years now, ever since that infamous meeting or interview that he did.
Yeah.
No, it's time we got real about this. I am fed up with the platitudes that have come out. And it's only recently that they decided they'd actually mentioned the victims. let's be real. Nobody pays out 12 million or allegedly 12 million to somebody you don't know, aided and abetted by your family, if you don't, before that, have had a real inquiry into the truth. And that's the truth of this. What on earth was going on at the palace by the officials and indeed the royals? They must have known the truth behind this before spending £12 million. It is inconceivable to me that anybody would do that without having real evidence of his guilt and the fact, even then, we didn't know a fraction of what is now alleged, and so on and so forth. So let's get real, let's get some truth for once, and let's get the police sorting this out once and for all. They have stopped doing that for many years, as far as this is concerned. And frankly, I'm angry about it because nobody should be above the law at every level. And somebody knew and have aided and abetted this. It's a conspiracy of silence, in my opinion.
I agree with you, Di, and I'm obviously, as you will be too, most concerned about the potential victims, potentially young women trafficked for things that we can't even talk about on a family show. And I'm also concerned about the damage to the monarchy because I'm a great monarchist and I want to preserve the royal family. Did you hear anything about Andrew's behaviour as your time serving as head of royal protection?
No, is the truth. And of course, it's a long time ago since I was there. And he was in the Navy then. And yes, he had a reputation for being a womanizer, but that's not a criminal offence. What is a criminal offence? If you aid and abet, counsel or procure trafficking. And that's the allegation against him. And that's been around now since 2015 when Virginia first made the allegation. And 4 times the Met Police have said, no, there's nothing to see here, even though 2 of the alleged participants were British. And as you know, if you traffic anywhere in the world as a British citizen for sex, that's a criminal offence. And yet, 4 times they have said, there's nothing to see here. Well, you don't get any evidence unless you investigate. And you investigate former police officers or current police officers who are protection officers. You interview the 4 or 5 people he took everywhere, including one to carry his ironing board, and say, what did you see? It just beggars belief, frankly, that we're all being taken for mugs.
Do you anticipate a call from the authorities in relation to your time as head of royal protection in regard to Andrew, or have they called?
Well, I had a brief phone call. I was on my way to have lunch with my family, and I said, well, I'll phone you back, or you can phone me back, and I haven't had a phone call. But the truth is, I've been calling this out, along with Andrew Lowney, who you've had on your show a number of times. I've been working, in brackets, with Andrew for a number of years on a number of projects. And again, if you, as you probably have, read his book, the evidence is there, and he has offered that evidence to the police. I say again, if you don't interview potential suspects or suspects, and that's what I say Andrew is and has been for 6 years, is a suspect. And if you don't interview him, if you don't interview those who are surrounded him, then you'll never know.
And what does it say about this effort at getting to the truth on the part of the authorities that those detectives didn't call you back and that they haven't drilled you for information, Di?
Well, that's for others to decide. All I can say is that for 4 years, I was the OCU commander responsible. But the truth is, I was not aware of any allegations. If I had been, and if I was aware of any officer who aided and abetted him in these dreadful, dreadful allegations, then they would have been either suspended and investigated. What I can't understand is everywhere the prince went and royal went, royalty protection do due diligence. How was it after his conviction, Epstein, nobody brought this to the authorities, nobody said you shouldn't go here, and that continued for a number of years. And every time a royal goes anywhere, you do a due diligence. You liaise with the local police, you liaise with the authorities in that country. What I don't understand is no one in the diplomatic service, in our embassies, anywhere in our security services mention the litany of dreadful people that he was mixing with, including Epstein. But this man, Andrew, was mixing with spies, he was mixing with dictators, Didn't anybody tell anybody about it? It's just beggars belief, doesn't it?
Is it possible that bodyguards or other staff within the royal household could face prosecution for turning a blind eye or even aiding and abetting this kind of trafficking?
Well, yes, no police officer is above the law, including me.
Do you have sympathy for them, though? Because we're talking about bodyguards and cops who have a livelihood, they've got mortgages. Are they going to be the ones to blow the whistle?
Well, I've heard this said that people, apparently a former senior protection officer went on LBC and said, you know, people were fearful. Well, nobody was fearful in my time. I can assure you, if you came and told me X, Y, and Z, you would not be sacked. This is absolute nonsense that people in my position and likewise would sack you for telling the truth. I resent that allegation. It certainly didn't come to my notice.
Are you sure there wasn't a culture of fear around Andrew's behaviour?
Well, there may have been. I didn't detect that. When I was there, he had 2 senior officers and an excellent team, as far as I was concerned, and I had no misgivings whatsoever about that team. They were well led at that time by people who'd been with him a long time.
Di, did he strike you as a bit of a wrong-un when you served as head of Royal Protection? Just as a human being, did you have a distaste for Andrew at all or not?
Yes. I did. He was an arrogant buffoon.
Wow. Arrogant buffoon. And look at the damage he's done. Di, what about the boss, King Charles? I know you wish Charles no ill will whatsoever, but does the buck stop with him? If there are figures within the firm, which is, of course, the nickname for the management of the royal family, if there are figures within the firm that knew what Andrew was up to, that turned a blind eye or even helped, does the buck stop with the king, and is he unseated as our monarch?
Well, I think it's a question people are asking now. If it can be shown that he, when he was the Prince of Wales, or even now, was made aware of these allegations and chose either to do nothing at that time. I appreciate now he has stripped him of everything. But, you know, at the end of the day, the royal family are kept well briefed by their senior officials as to what's going on in the media, what's going on in the world. It, to me, inconceivable that the late Queen and other senior royals were not made aware of the allegations, that they didn't probe it in any shape or form. And if that can be shown to be true, then clearly issues will follow.
Di, thank you for your trenchant response to this developing story. Di Davies is the former head of Royal Protection. If the firm knew what was going on, does the boss fall on his sword, the boss being King Charles? 8:50, this is Talk Breakfast.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk Breakfast at 8:53. Edwina Currie, one of the best-known former politicians in the country, joins us at 9. I'll be asking her whether the Chagos giveaway can be reversed. And also I'll be asking her whether Reform UK can save the British economy. A quick one from Andy, who points out double standards in regard to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Andy says, good morning, Mark. So now 9 police forces can do an investigation into one man, which is the right thing to do, but are happy to turn a blind eye or dismiss or shut down reports of Muslim rape gangs across all forces. Both are wrong and need the same attention. Shame on the police. No wonder we don't trust them. Andy in Cornwall. Andy, thank you for that. OK, I'll tell you something. If you think Starmer's under pressure, if you think that Rachel Reeves is under pressure, it's nothing like the Arsenal manager.
90 minutes in 90 seconds. From The Sun.
And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Catherine Walsh to Talk Breakfast, the Manchester United reporter at The Sun newspaper. Morning, Catherine.
Good morning, Mark.
This has got to be the very definition of squeaky bum time. Can you just give my viewers and listeners a sense of the perilous situation that Arsenal now find themselves in?
Well, Coca-Cola might not be the biggest bottle company in the world anymore. It might be Mikel Arteta's Arsenal. They were 6 points clear at the turn of the year, and everyone said it was a foregone conclusion that they had finally ended their 22-year wait to lift the league title and the first trophy for Arteta since 2020 after finishing second the last 3 years. But it has somewhat fallen apart now. City are still 5 points behind, but they have a game in hand. And if City win their remaining 12 games, they will win the league title. Arsenal still need to go to the Etihad, a notoriously difficult place for them and anyone else. And if you're Mikel Arteta now, you're really, really, really worried.
Now, as a Spurs fan, Catherine, I resent Arsenal's success, but I will begrudgingly say, against my better judgment, they deserve this title. But will they get it? You know, has it stopped being about football now? Is it about their heads rather than their feet?
Yes, absolutely. The questions now are the same questions that have been plaguing them over the last few years, is if they're mentally tough enough, if they're ruthless enough. And you saw that at Wolves last night. As soon as it went to 2-1, the misplaced passing, the heads down, the calamity at the back towards the end, and even the arguing in the dressing room between the players, Mikel Arteta as well. So it is falling apart. And, you know, a trip now to the North London derby on the weekend. Spurs have a new manager, you know, new manager bounce. Can Spurs get their first win over Arsenal in the league since 2022? They maybe can.
Wow. So you are using the word collapse, which is powerful. Is the North London derby at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium or at the Emirates?
It's at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Sunday.
Be afraid, be very... And of course, if they drop 3 points there, then suddenly City are actually... well, the mathematics are... Where would they be? They'd be 1 point...
City have a game in hand
as
well.
Yeah.
So they play Forest at home in 2 weeks' time, which they are expected to win. Pep Guardiola is a happy man in Manchester today, which is where I am.
Definitely, but they're not the finished job, are they, Catherine? And they've stuttered plenty of times this season. I won't hold you to this, but what does your gut say about who lifts the trophy in a few weeks' time?
A few weeks ago, I would have definitely said it would be Arsenal, just because City, as you say, are just so inconsistent. But they've made some strong January signings, Semedo and Mark Dolan from Palace. They're now stronger at the back, but again, very inconsistent. So it really is going to be one to watch, and probably a fascinating end to the season, which seemed like a foregone conclusion only a few weeks ago.
Great stuff, Catherine. Thank you so much. Catherine Walsh is the Manchester United reporter at The Sun newspaper. Tom is in Reigate. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, young man. Now, let me say to you, the Conservatives might have been in power 14 years and they've done a lot of wrong.
Yeah.
And they want to right it now. But don't remember, all this debt, 80% of it is down to COVID.
True.
This Starmer is a very, very dangerous man. The whole government needs to be pulled into book and resign, mate.
dangerous. He's a traitor, that Starmer. Absolute liar. You sound about resign Johnson every week in the talk. And
studio, yeah.
The sleaze he's been under, suits, glasses, dodgy money, with a tax bill rainer.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, how much more sleaze do the old Labour need?
Tom, you're right. First of all, Boris Johnson never had someone paying for his suits or tickets to Taylor Swift. And the other issue is that he lost his job because he stood near a glass of orange juice.
That's it. And also, mate, he never had no one to cut his bloody hair, did he?
Tom, you've put a smile on my face and our army of viewers and listeners. Call me again soon, Tom. Have an excellent Thursday, top man. This show exists for you, by you, it belongs to you. My job is to get your opinions on the radio and on the telly. Keith says, Mark, we should cancel Starmer's deal on the Chagos Islands, charge the Americans for renting Diego Garcia and invest the money in the islands for the future of the Chagosian people. Brilliant. What a great idea. What a creative idea that is. So much more to come. Next up, Edwina Curry.
This journey of me following the migrants went from sort of 10 in the morning, all around the clock, to late at night, to the point where, on buses, on trains, through streets, at every key point, French military police and the French police, they were there. They were on the bus, taking down notes, taking pictures, but not doing anything to deter the migrants or stop them, just being there. I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. His WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Three minutes past 9, Talk Breakfast. Lovely to have your company. Mark Dolan with you all of this week, in for the brilliant Jeremy Kyle, who's back on Monday. And breaking this morning, Trump slams surrender Starmer. Can the Chagos Islands giveaway be prevented? Who better to ask than one of the most experienced ex-politicians in the country, broadcaster and best-selling author Edwina Curry. Good morning, Edwina.
Good morning, Mark. I'm not pretending to be an expert on the Chagos, but I know a bad deal when I see one.
That's the problem, and it's the messaging of this, isn't it? Sovereign British territory. It paints a picture of a country in retreat.
It does, and it also paints a picture of a Foreign Office that really doesn't know what it's doing and is very much at odds with the sort of thing that the Prime Minister's been talking about in the security conference earlier this week about how we have to protect ourselves and Britain first and all the rest of it. Meanwhile, an obscure United Nations ruling some time ago is leading us to give away a whole chunk of territory and make it extremely vulnerable to China and to Russia. That just does not make sense. It really doesn't.
Edwina, why do you think my viewers and listeners should care? This is an obscure, small territory thousands of miles away.
Because our welfare and our security really matter. Because whether we like it or not, geopolitics has changed a lot in the last 20 years or so, and is very much more fragile than I think it's been for many, many decades. I mean, I can remember the time when we had bombers flying over, well, really flying over where I lived, when we had the Berlin airlift when I was a kid, and it was really very, very scary time. And I remember also our worries about Cuba and the Russians putting missiles, appearing to put nuclear missiles in Cuba that would directly threaten the United States. But since then, I think there's been a kind of uneasy peace. But more recently, especially since Putin has become the leader of Russia, of the Russian Federation, things have got much hairier, and we have the quiet and enormous rise of China over to the east, which is now dominant economy of the world. So we have many more problems, and it directly affects who we are, who invest in our country, whether we are safe with the investment in our country. Anxieties about China in particular are rife, and I think are probably entirely sound. So yes, of course we should be worried about it. Strategic bases, which 100 years ago we didn't need to explain to anybody. Strategic bases around the world actually help to protect the home country, which is us. And our government's first job is to keep the country safe. This government doesn't seem to have a clue about any of that, does it?
Well, that's a view shared by Chris, Edwina, who says, "Good morning, Mark. Listening to the Chagosian spokesperson on the island really highlights the state of the UK. This is a man who's willing to lay down his life to protect his islands. I'd bet if you asked people in the UK, 99% would not die to protect the UK. This is what the government has done to our once beautiful country." Of course, we spoke earlier, Edwina, to Misley Mandarin, who is the effective acting First Minister of the Chagosian Islands, who has told this programme, "I will die to keep this territory British." Will he prevail, do you think? Do you anticipate another Starmer U-turn?
I wouldn't be in the least surprised if we get another Starmer U-turn. I mean, giving away the Chagos Islands has been entirely a question of bowing to human rights lawyers, Starmer's friends, people like Lord Harmer and so on. And it's a very dodgy way of behaving if what you're really thinking is that the interests of your country and of your side, if you like, of democracy really come first. I think we need to trade with countries like China. I think we need to have dialogue with countries like Russia. But I think we need to... What was it Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, the American president of 120 odd years ago, said? He said, speak softly and carry a big stick. And I think that's the way to preserve peace in the world. If you're seen as weak, Mark, if you're seen as a pushover, then you will get pushed over. If you stand in the middle of the road, you get knocked down by traffic from both sides. It's not that difficult to figure that out. Only somebody like Starmer, stuck in the Westminster bubble, is really going to go for this. Plus, of course, what you haven't mentioned is it's going to cost us a fortune, because the deal with the Chagos Islands and with Mauritius is that we're going to hand over billions. I thought we needed the money for the health service. I thought we needed the money to fill our potholes. I thought we needed the money to increase our defence. No, we seem to be more than willing to hand it over to a bunch of people in Mauritius. Mauritius is a lovely country. I've been there a number of times. It's a beautiful place. but it is not the place that you would normally want to be handing over something like £8 billion of hard-earned British taxpayers' money, is it?
Most definitely not. Edwina, let's take a listen to the effective, acting, as it were, Shadow Chancellor for Reform UK, Robert Jenrick, speaking in a first keynote with that Shadow Chancellor brief yesterday in central London, and in particular discussing the two-child benefit cap.
As a signal of intent today, Reform is changing our policy on the two-child cap for universal credit. The policy was well-meaning. We want to help British working families to have more children. But right now, we just can't afford to do so with welfare. So it has to go. As Reform's Shadow Chancellor, I'm ending it. A Reform government will restore the cap in full. We are the party of alarm clock Britain. We are a party of workers and not welfare.
Edwina, what a wonderful speech. He sounded like Nigel Lawson, didn't he? The man that became Chancellor in the same year that you entered the House of Commons.
I think Robert Jenrick has got, I want to be the boss, I want to be the PM written all over
Edwina,
his forehead.
you're so cynical.
Well, I've been in politics, darling. You haven't. I've met people like that. I've had breakfast with them. I've sat with them in the smoking room, as it used to be called, and I've watched them eating their biscuits. Actually, he doesn't look like he eats biscuits. He looks like he's the man that's been on the jabs, and you never know what's in some of those or what the long-term effects are.
Most definitely.
When it comes to doing something about benefits, actually just putting the two-child benefit cap back is not going to be enough. They're going to have to, a future government is going to have to be very determined and is going to have to put this in its manifesto, so it has a mandate that we have to cut benefits. We have to reduce the number of people that are on benefits, and we have to reduce the overall amount. Some families are able to bring in £60,000 a year in benefits, which is insane. It's because of lots of loopholes, and people learn how to do that. And I don't blame them. You know, if you could get £60,000, Mark, without doing anything, without having to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, it's very tempting, isn't it? But it's costing a fortune, and it means that our country has now got large numbers of unemployed people because the taxes are so high. And sooner or later, a government will get to grips with this, as other governments in other countries have already started to do.
Have Reform UK become the true Conservatives?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I mean, I think they paint themselves, first of all, as radicals, not conservatives. They're not trying to conserve anything. What they're trying to do is promote themselves. And, you know, I can see why Nigel Farage, after what, 25 years, more than 25 years in politics, trying to get elected over and over again to the House of Commons, why he should want to do that. Mind you, he's elected to the House of Commons and he never turns up. He's always busy off somewhere else in Europe with his girlfriend or somebody. I mean, you know, far be it from me to criticise anybody in those circumstances, but nonetheless, they've reached peak popularity, I think. They're on about 30%. You can't win a general election in Britain on 30%. And the fact they haven't managed to get any further than that is a testimony in part, I think, to Kemi Badenoch, who's doing a cracking good job of getting the Tory party re-established and put on a much more firm footing, and an intelligent, sensible, calm footing without all the histrionics. But as I say, the next government that gets elected needs to have a mandate for reducing benefits. Otherwise, our country has no future.
Well, so many of my viewers and listeners are fed up with open borders, with the cost of net zero, with the cost of living, and how hard it is now, especially for young people, to get work. They want a radical solution, Edwina. It's understandable that they look to Nigel Farage, who's a disruptive figure, rather than a party that was in power for 1.5 decades.
Of course, that's entirely natural. And at this stage in a government, bearing in mind that the government that's in are the Labour Party, and they won a huge majority and have so many MPs in the House of Commons that they can't all get onto the government benches. There's a protest vote here. There's a vote of frustration and despair and anger and it is heading not to the immediate previous government, it's heading to a fringe party. That's kind of par for the course. Those of us with long memories will have heard this happening before. But it isn't a guarantee of a sound future. In the end, you have to put the same questions to any political party, all of them. Are you solid people? Are you reliable people? Can we trust you? Have you got an intelligent manifesto that actually adds up? Have you got the guts to do what you say you're going to do, or are you going to, turn around and do lots of U-turn? There was a lovely cartoon yesterday in the Daily Telegraph, Mark. I don't know if you saw it. And it had one nice old telegraph reader saying to another, oh, my goodness, if the government makes another U-turn, they'd be back where they started.
Yeah.
Well, that wouldn't be a bad place to be.
No, and I saw another good headline, actually a cartoon in The Guardian. And yes, I'm afraid for my sins, I have to read it because I need to hear what everyone's thinking. And it was a good cartoon. It was an image of Nigel Farage with his shadow cabinet, but they were all shadowed out because of the light on his face, which I thought was quite clever. But a couple of things, Edwina. Are you suggesting that you don't trust Nigel Farage as a human being and as a man and as a person?
Well, I don't know him as a man, I'm afraid. So
Are you making a moral judgment about him, though? Are you suggesting that he's a snake oil salesman or even a wrong 'un?
He's a very ambitious man. He's been very consistent in at least some of his views.
You don't deny that you think he might be a wrong 'un?
It's very hard to say whether somebody is a wrong 'un unless you know them a little more carefully and a little more closely. I've had no business dealings with him. I don't think I've ever been in the same room as he has. But there's something very appealing about the populist. That doesn't make them a good future leader of the country. Winning elections is one thing. Governing the country needs a whole new different set of skills, the ability to compromise, the ability to persuade people of different ideas and attitudes, the ability to look into the future and choose amongst the many different options and explain that to the public. Margaret Thatcher did that. I mean, she didn't have it right away. She had to learn how to do it. Farage is a persuasive character. That's the best you can say about him. But that's what you also say, as you have just hinted, about snake oil salesmen.
Well, I think that these populists are slightly underrated. You could argue that Margaret Thatcher was an early incarnation of conservative populism. And look at the United States. Now, I know that Donald Trump says a lot of very silly things, Edwina, but he's improved the terms by which America trades with the world. He's closed the southern border. He's deporting dangerous criminals. And of course, he's brokered several peace deals around the world with hopefully something on Ukraine in this calendar year. I just wonder whether your remarks about reform are a bit insulting to some of my viewers and listeners, Edwina, when you talk about the idea that it's a fringe group or that it's a protest vote. Many of my audience will say, this is not a protest at all. I want change.
Well, to use the words of the wonderful Jim Ratcliffe recently, I do apologise if anybody feels offended. Too bad. Too bad. I mean, I have to say what I think. I'm sure you would agree that that's the best thing ever.
Of course.
I think there are one or two people in Reform, starting with Robert Jenrick, who are saying what they think the public want to hear. That's not the way forward. Not at all.
Edwina, we love having you on the show. Thank you for the truth bombs. We'll speak very soon. The fearless and articulate Edwina Currie, of course, former Conservative government minister, broadcaster and best-selling author. Well, what about this Reform UK speech yesterday? Robert Jenrick. Fascinating. He's talking about lower taxes. He's talking about scrapping net zero, no benefits for illegal immigrants or overseas foreigners. It's a big, big economic revolution. But here's a question for you at 9 on Talk Breakfast. Can Reform UK save the British economy? I'll be asking Liam Halligan next.
Join me, Ian Collins, every weekday from 1.
My 12-year-old. Obviously, he won't be 12 then, he'll be 16, but if he's anything like he is now, he shouldn't be anywhere near an election booth. Do you sympathise with him? Is he the victim of the 24-hour news cycle we just spoke of?
I think his failings are internal. He's useless, incompetent, has no political judgment.
Everything you need to know. All the breaking news right here on Talk.
Weekday afternoons from 1 o'clock. Only at the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk Breakfast 9:20. So Reform UK have outlined and revealed some of their effective shadow cabinet. Of course, perhaps the most important job in government other than Prime Minister would be Chancellor of the Exchequer. So can Robert Jenrick and Reform UK rescue the British economy? Who better to ask than economist and author of the brilliant Substack When the Facts Change, the host, of course, of Planet Normal and columnist at The Telegraph, Liam Halligan. Morning, Liam.
Morning, Mark. Nice to be with you.
Great to have you on the show. For you, what were the headlines from Jenrick's keynote speech yesterday?
Well, I think what Reform are trying to do in general, they are trying to reassure financial markets that they are fiscally responsible, that they're not going to borrow and spend in the way the Labour Party has, because the worst thing that could happen for Reform UK is that they win an election and they become the government, or they're part of leading a coalition government of some kind, and then the bond markets instantly collapse and push borrowing costs to the moon, and everyone in the country will be impacted by that. It will dominate headlines around the world. So Reform are trying to avoid what some people in the markets may call a Liz Truss moment, when the bond markets rebel, and in order to do that they have to shed the idea that they're going to spend lots of money on welfare. They have to shed the idea that they're trying to bribe red wall voters with more state largesse and more massive industrial subsidies. The party has a kind of Thatcherite hinterland. Richard Tice is a small state kind of guy. Nigel Farage himself is a small state kind of guy. But in recent months and years, I think Kemi Badenoch has successfully managed to tar Reform with the idea that their sums don't add up and they're just making up policy as they go along. I don't think that's fair. I think it's politically inevitable she'd try to do that. I do think Reform have been working hard behind the scenes on their economic policies. But the first thing they have to do, first and foremost, is convince international capital markets that they're serious grown-up people and they are not going to engage in massive fiscal bungs to the electorate, as some people who call them populist would claim they're going to do. So that's their first step.
Very strong on illegal immigration and legal migration as well. But is it fair that the soft underbelly of the Reform UK offer is the economy?
I think the economy is what everyone really cares about. Obviously, immigration's right up there, and I don't think any major party is going to out-reform when it comes to immigration, though Rupert Lowe and other remnants on the right of politics will have a go. But in terms of mainstream parties, which Reform now undoubtedly is, no one's going to out-reform them when it comes to immigration. So I think moving on to the economy, putting the focus on the economy, making their first major shadow cabinet appointment, if you like, rather cheeky using the phrase shadow cabinet, of course, because they're not the official opposition, but the Lib Dems do it, so why can't Reform? The fact that their first major shadow cabinet appointment is the economy shows, I think, that Nigel Farage and his team are trying to move away from this kind of one-trick pony idea. They're not just a one-man band. Farage, and they're not just a one-trick pony, only focusing on immigration.
Indeed, and they singled out Liz Truss, which many on the right wouldn't, because they would argue that whilst the execution was poor, they lauded Liz Truss's efforts to spark economic growth, but no ownership of Truss's legacy whatsoever. Absolutely, unquestionably thrown under the bus by Jenrick, of course, a former stablemate of Liz Truss. It's interesting that you mentioned the divided support within Reform UK, because there are plenty of people that would like to see Thatcherism 2.0 by way of our economic approach. But as you said, there are working class communities in the north of England and the Midlands who are going to support Nigel Farage, and many of those are families who rely on welfare. So how do Reform square that circle?
That is the circle they have to square. It's pretty difficult for them to do so. I think the only way they can do it is the way that Margaret Thatcher tried to do it. In the end, as you'll remember, is part of our childhood, Mark, a lot of working class people came on board for Thatcher because in the end they were sick of the chaos that the Labour Party had sowed across the economy in the 1970s. And no one who wasn't a state worker could make a living. And I think Reform have to try and get across the idea that they are the party of stability, they are the party of responsible government borrowing and spending, and in the end that is what will create an environment where people can live, work and improve themselves and work for themselves and their family. It's a difficult sell. It's much easier to just say, yeah, we're going to give you this and we're going to give you that and we're going to print money and it will all be fine. But I think the public are sick of that. And when it comes to it, and I know I saw Nigel Farage last night. I was talking to him in Westminster, and I made the point to him, and I think he gets the point, that when it comes to it, the British public will vote for the grown-ups. They will vote for economic pain if they think economic pain is what's needed. Margaret Thatcher won a landslide in 1979, and she was saying, I'm not going to spend lots of government money. I'm not going to borrow lots of government money because we can't afford it. David Cameron's Tories won in 2010. Again, they were promoting the idea we have to have fiscal controls. We can't keep spending beyond our means. In the end, the statist lobby is loud and it's gobby, and it's backed up by most broadcasters, not least the BBC, who thinks no problem can't be solved with more government spending and borrowing, it seems. And yet out there across Middle England, across the country as a whole, I think people understand that we can't keep living like this. And that's before we have some kind of really serious bond market meltdown, which a lot of people think is coming, given the extent to which Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are borrowing and spending, and given the fact, Mark, it won't have escaped you, that as and when Starmer and Reeves are eased out, as they will be before the next scheduled election in 2029, possibly in the next few months, then whoever replaces them on the Labour front bench, whoever goes into number 10, is going to be a lot more left-wing than Keir Starmer, and he or she's going to have a chancellor that's a lot more left-wing than Rachel Reeves. These are people who just think, just because they feel they are nice people, they can just borrow and spend, and it's the right thing to do. No, it isn't the right thing to do when you're absolutely driving the economy off a cliff, which is what they're doing, of course. And so I think Farage has to tread a really careful path between appealing to kind of Reform's base, if you like, in the red wall, while also standing up for fiscal reality. Is Robert Jenrick the person who can do that for him? Well, we shall see. He's certainly talking tough at the moment, but when it comes down to it, when it gets to Alex Ferguson's squeaky bum time and political competition really hots up, are Reform going to be able to hold that line, that we're not just going to spend lots of money, we are going to be fiscally responsible? Are they going to remember that their first duty on coming into office is to make sure there isn't an immediate bond market crisis?
Indeed, and what that may require in 2 or 3 years' time is austerity on acid. That's going to take courage and political will. We saw that from Thatcher in the 80s, didn't we, Liam? As you said, that was a time in our lives when we were first becoming familiar with politics, and what a political revolution that was. But there was a lot of pain as Margaret Thatcher fixed the foundations of our economy, particularly unemployment, which was a consequence of her war on inflation. In the end, we got there, 1987. We were a global economic, diplomatic and military powerhouse. But it took stubborn will, it took discipline. Another issue is the inheritance. How broken might the economy be in 3 years' time?
Well, Thatcher got there in the end, but it took her a while, and it wasn't immediately obvious she was going to go for a much, much smaller state when she came in. We'll see if it doesn't repeat itself. We'll see if history rhymes. In terms of the economy that Labour took over, we have to be fair dealing when we talk about this, Mark.
Yeah.
You know, Labour took over a pretty bad economic situation from the Tories. Taxation was at a 70-year high. The national debt was pushing 95% of GDP off the back of COVID, of course. What a contrast to when Tony Blair took over in 97 and the state debt wasn't 95% of GDP, it was 30% of GDP, and the economy was growing at 2 or 3%. So Labour had a bad inheritance, but I just think it's objectively true they've made the situation a lot worse. You mentioned unemployment. We're not up at 1 in 10 like the UB40 song back in the early 80s, but we're at 5.2% unemployment, which is up from 4.1% when Labour took over in August 2024. Inflation, of course, was around 2% when they came in. Inflation is now 3%, and I'm not convinced inflation is going to come down sustainably any time soon. And of course, we've had very, very slow growth. We just had 0.1% growth of the economy in the fourth quarter, which is risible, below OBR forecast, below the government's official estimates. And that means when the economy grows more slowly, Mark, as your canny talk viewers and listeners know, when the economy grows more slowly than is expected, that means less tax revenue, more government spending on welfare and unemployment benefit because you haven't got that growth. So the government's going to come for more tax. And as Churchill taught us, you can't, tax your way to prosperity. It's like standing in a bucket trying to pull yourself up by the handle. And that is where we are. The only answer Labour seems to have to any problem is more borrowing and more tax. And whoever replaces Starmer is going to think that even more so. And that, in the end, is going to drive us off an economic cliff edge. The only question for me is whether or not there's some kind of, and I don't want this, but it strikes me that's where we're going. The question for me is if there's some kind of crisis before or after the next general election. Nigel Farage will be hoping it's before.
If you're looking for the best political and economic substack out there, then have a look at When the Facts Change. World-renowned UK economist Liam Halligan. It's a fascinating read. He's, of course, also a columnist at The Telegraph and the co-host of Planet Normal with Alison Pearson, which is about to celebrate its 300th episode. Thank you, Liam. Phil is in London. Morning, Phil.
Morning. I just hope that your listeners just heard what he just said there, a complete category error. He just said the government spends and borrows and taxes. How can the government spend money, print money, and borrow at the same time? So complete category error. He's useless. He hasn't got a clue. But besides the point, I'm not a Labour supporter. I'm not a Tory supporter. I'm not a Reform supporter either. In fact, I think all the parties are crap. But I did hear what he said about Reform voters in the red wall, and they're going to find they're going to have to go through pain. I hope those red wall voters now do not vote Reform, because they've had enough pain, and I hope they don't go and do this again for more pain. And that's it. That's all I had to say.
Phil, briefly, what is the answer then? If it's not Reform, if it's not Tory?
I don't think it's what we've got at the moment, but I don't think it's more pain. Do you think those red wall voters want more pain? Is that what you think they need?
No, I think you're absolutely right about that, Phil. And so, what's the answer? I mean, who are you going to vote for, Phil?
Economics. I'm not going to make assumptions or say anything. All I know is it has to be grown up. But this whole notion that everyone's going to have to go through more pain is not going to get anyone on side. It's risible that he's even mentioned that we have to go through more pain. These people cannot get jobs. Now, I say, fair enough, OK, we're taxing too much. Labour are doing a dismal job on the economy. I totally get it.
Yeah.
Kids can't get jobs. But to tell your core voters in the red wall that they're going to have to go through more pain, how on earth will you get them on side?
Well, I would agree with you, Phil. What about this as an answer, which is simply cut spending, cut public spending in government departments? Surely that's the answer.
Public spending, and those people still cannot get jobs. What does that do to people who are on unemployment? Well, you cut their unemployment benefits even more. They can't get jobs. What do they do?
Phil, you raised the dilemma facing any future administration. Phil, thank you for your point. I hear the passion in your voice, and I hear your fury at the idea that working class communities should somehow absorb more pain. I'm sure, Phil, you'd be arguing that they've had it since 2008 in the financial crash when we bailed out the banks. Who paid the price? The poorest in our society. Phil, thank you for that. Call me again. I enjoyed your trenchant views. Breaking news. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has appointed Dame Antonia Romeo as Cabinet Secretary, the UK's top civil servant. Now, this is controversial because Sir Chris Wormald was the previous Cabinet Secretary. It's the most senior civil servant in the country. He was only there for a year. You're supposed to get a decade when you're the Cabinet Secretary. It's not a political appointment. Poor old Wormald has been thrown under the bus because of the failures of this administration. In steps Dame Antonia Romeo, who, let's not forget, has faced a full investigation into alleged bullying behaviour and the misappropriation of her personal expenses. Now, she was cleared in regard to that, but that cloud hangs over her. Those allegations hang over her. This is a Prime Minister that appointed a housing secretary that didn't pay her stamp duty, a Prime Minister that appointed a corruption minister that's being investigated for corruption, a transport minister that nicked a mobile phone. The list goes on. A Prime Minister that gave the biggest job in diplomacy, UK ambassador to the United States, to a paedophile's best mate. And now we've got somebody in the civil service at the very top who faces serious questions about her conduct in office. But of course, it all doesn't matter. Do you know why? Because she's a woman. And it's all about identity politics. Just like Rachel Reeves, first woman Chancellor. Well, let me tell you, she's the worst woman Chancellor. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for women in public life. Margaret Thatcher, the greatest Prime Minister since Churchill. But can we have talented women that aren't shrouded in allegations of misappropriation of their expenses and bullying behaviour? We've got more breaking news at 9:36. Donald Trump is preparing to unleash a week-long blitz on Iran within days. Amid an unprecedented US military build-up in the Middle East, it comes as the Prime Minister of Poland tells any Polish citizens in Iran to leave the country. It appears that America is going to strike Iran in the days ahead. We'll bring you reaction next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
(9:37) Talk Breakfast. Julia Hartley-Brewer live at 10. And don't forget, I'm with you all weekend. And as of Monday, Jeremy Kyle is back, and I'll be looking after Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it's the greatest privilege to do so. We're planning a big weekend of shows coming up tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday. And how about this as a turn up for the books? Even the BBC have acknowledged now that London, the capital of the United Kingdom, also has grooming gangs. I wonder whether the Mayor of London got the memo, because he seemed to have pushed back on the idea of grooming gangs in the capital when quizzed on this by Susan Hall, a Conservative group member at the London Assembly. Take a listen.
I'm asking you, do we have those sort of gangs in London?
I'm not sure why she's so nervous to say what she means. What do you mean?
No. I am saying exactly what I mean. I'm saying, have we got any of those grooming gangs in London?
I'm unclear, Chair, what is meant by the question. If she could spell it out, I can answer.
I've just spelt it out. Are you not listening? It's the sort of gangs that groom young girls at a young age for sex. Exactly how much clearer do you want me to be?
Well, that fearless and courageous politician joins me now. Susan Hall, Conservative group member at the London Assembly and former Met Police detective and a very good friend of this network and this show, Peter Bleksley. Susan, what's the story here? What are we hearing about the scale of grooming gangs in the capital?
Well, it's shocking, but many of us have known this for a long time. Why we haven't got a national inquiry is completely beyond me. Why these Labour politicians in particular think it's a good thing to refer to us as far right and that's old cherry and all of those sort of
dog whistle to quote Lucy Powell.
Yeah. And Sadiq Khan was a damn disgrace, and that video has gone viral because nobody can believe he could be just so blooming awful, but he is, I'm afraid. And a year has gone by since that particular video, and I've been hearing from so many of the victims, and they're the ones we should feel for because it is an absolutely shocking situation to be in.
Now, I know, Susan, you're not able to give me the details, but can you just give me a flavour of how harrowing some of these stories are?
Oh, Mark, they're just awful. Some of these girls, not all of them, have never been loved, and they go into care and nobody's ever cared for them. And then they meet these older men who then buy them a load of things, and they think that is what being loved is. And they don't realise when they're in this. And the BBC documentary thing came out, and it said the same. We all, any of us that look into it, find the same. They don't realise they're in that situation until they're older and look back on it. It's great that it's being kept in the news now, and it must not be taken out of the news until something is done. We owe these young kids far, far more than they get now.
And I know that the injuries are incalculable, physical and emotional scars, an absolutely horrific crime on an industrial scale, Susan. Peter Bleksley is also with us, former Met Police detective. And it's not beyond the wit of man, is it, Peter, to assume that Britain's most populous city might contain a couple of grooming gangs?
Of course, it was blatantly obvious to anybody involved in investigative journalism, law enforcement and more. Let me just raise some important points here. I'm very, very quick to chide both the BBC and the Metropolitan Police when they get it wrong. But in this situation, highlighting the plight of the victims by the BBC is commendable, and Metropolitan Police officers now speaking out about the scale of this problem is also to be praised. But if we just move on to the lamentable Sadiq Khan for a moment, what he has proven here is that he is, number one, either a liar, or number two, he is ignorant of the blatantly obvious. On either case, Sir Sadiq Khan is fundamentally unfit to hold high office of any description whatsoever.
Of course, Susan Hall, the Mayor of London, will argue that he has deployed significant police resources to tackling sexual violence against women in the capital, and that he has barely got a wink of sleep trying to do that for the entirety of his time as mayor.
Oh, well, I can't say what I'm thinking because, I just can't. Mark, how dare he? How dare he? You just played the clip. He pretended he didn't know a thing about it. And this is what Labour politicians are doing. They pretend they have absolutely no idea, and it's all the far right that's bringing this up. No, it is not. That clip was a year ago. A year on, we've got more and more young kids, mainly girls, but also boys, in these dreadful situations. He may say he's thrown money at it, but he's not fixed it. He hasn't come to terms with the fact that they exist until he had to. It's a damn disgrace, and this must not be overlooked again. This has got to be dealt with. And I'm afraid to say, and I'll get lambasted for this, but the more people that we have come into the country that regard women as second-class citizens at best, the more likely we are to have problems going forward. We've got to put a stop to this, and we've got to make sure that the authorities recognise it when it's happening.
Susan, you will never be lambasted on this show for speaking the truth. The BBC, as Peter has rightly said, Susan, have been pretty forthright on this and done their job as journalists. They've also found that there was enough evidence to show, and I quote, disproportionate numbers of men from Asian ethnic backgrounds among suspects for group-based child sexual exploitation. Now, we know, Susan and Peter, that these awful crimes are committed by men of all ethnicities, including white Brits. But, Susan Hall, you need to know the ethnicity because certainly in other parts of the country, it was an aggravating factor.
Yeah, it certainly was. I will say in London, it's a complete mixed bunch. It really is. And some of the gangs are complete mixed amongst them. So I don't think it's perhaps so prevalent in London as in specific groups of people. But it certainly has proved to be elsewhere in the country. And this is the problem, you see, Mark. People are shying away. Don't say that because it's racist. Or we mustn't do that, we'll upset the community. Well, blow that. The people we need to be looking after are these poor victims. Because if you'd ever interviewed them, Mark, if you'd ever sat in a room and talked to them, you end up in tears because it is so horrific. We absolutely must look after these victims, and I don't care what community we offend. I don't care what politicians we offend from any side of any party. This has got to be dealt with, and the police do need to get a grip of this. I'm very pleased that Peter has said that more police are coming forward, and they are. But as somebody who is passionate about policing, I've always defended the police. I'm afraid some of the stories I hear where the police have turned a blind eye, I'm devastated because I would have always said that they wouldn't do that. And I'm afraid they have, and that's dreadful.
Indeed. And of course, we've heard anecdotes in the north of England of some of the young victims being arrested for being drunk and disorderly. We've heard these girls described as fair game or other such language I can't use on a family show. We've also had victims gaslit, and that is the big problem. Now, Peter, you as an ex-cop know that there are lots of wicked people in this country, and there are plenty of rapists of British white origin. They're disgusting, they're vermin, lock them up, throw away the key. However, I've got to ask you a simple question, which is, are grooming gangs an ethnic phenomenon?
Well, the commendable and determined Susan Hall, when she speaks about the evidence relating to the identity of these offenders in London, is largely relying on anecdotal evidence. And the reason that is the evidence that is relied on at the moment is because generations of senior police officers have cowardly instructed their underlings not to record the ethnicity, the background of offenders. And that is absolutely a dereliction of duty. Every offender for every crime should have their ethnicity, their background recorded. That is so you can get accurate statistics. You can then launch accurate and pointed investigations towards whatever criminality it is being committed by people of whatever background. Shame on those police officers. They were cowardly. They didn't want the truth out there, and consequently officers have not recorded the ethnicity of offenders, which they most definitely should do.
Now, this may sound trivial, Peter and Susan, but Tom Cruise, the biggest film star in the world, has left London because of high levels of crime. Now, the reason I make no apologies to talk about a rich film star, and I know that plenty will think he can afford security guards, I get it. First of all, this is another very wealthy man that's leaving the United Kingdom, not spending his money here, not buying Rolls Royces here, but also it's our capital city. And if a high-profile figure like that doesn't feel safe, I think it's damning, and I think it's a story that's reflected across a lot of the big cities in our country, in Glasgow, in Manchester, in Birmingham. and elsewhere, Liverpool, you name it. Let's take a listen to Kemi Badenoch talking about Tom Cruise's decision to leave London because of crime.
I have some devastating personal news. My favourite actor, Tom Cruise, has fled London. Like many others, he is an Anglophile who loves our city, but he's left. This is becoming a familiar story. People just don't feel safe. Tom Cruise had a £35 million flat overlooking Hyde Park, minutes away from this attack, where hammer and machete-wielding robbers raided a Rolex store. This matters. Many families across the country, and particularly in our capital, feel unsafe. And unlike Tom Cruise, they can't just sell up and move so easily.
Susan, it may be a hard sell, but can you explain to my viewers and listeners why it's important that rich, successful people don't feel safe in our capital city, why it matters?
Well, it matters because it actually reflects how most of us feel. It also matters that we keep very wealthy people here because they employ lots of people. They often run businesses here. We need people that will be entrepreneurs, and they are very wealthy. And they are getting concerned because their Rolex watches are stolen, phones are stolen every 7 minutes now, apparently. That gives a feeling of not being safe. And so it does matter. It matters whether the poorest or the richest don't feel safe. But we certainly can't afford to lose any more millionaires out of London because they employ, they are the ones that are running businesses. They're the ones that bring business opportunities to us. And as a capital city, we need those people. We also have a good reputation so that we get tourists here because that helps the economy. I mean, Rachel Reeves does not help the economy in any which way. She's an absolute disaster. And you know, it's all part and parcel of why people are leaving London. Given that it's the best place in the world, it's an absolute disgrace. This government, and certainly Sadiq Khan, is damaging London beyond all belief.
Well, it is deeply concerning. And the reason why on this show I will always speak up for wealth creators is, as you've said, Susan, they invest in the country. Let me just tell you, the VAT on a really top-level Lamborghini is about £100,000. Right, that goes straight into the NHS or to the police force or schools and teachers or new hospitals or potholes. So why we don't love bomb wealthy people and make sure that this is a place to live safely and invest, I don't understand. Also, Peter, this will catch your eye. Last week, we got footage of a shocking jeweller's robbery at Hatton Garden, which of course is one of the big places in London where you can buy jewellery. Take a look at this. Well, for those listening on the radio, you'll have heard the sound of hammers being smashed into windows. This is supposedly the greatest city in the world, but crime is out of control. Peter, what do you make of that footage of jewellers in Hatton Garden brazen attacking a property and stealing stuff?
Sometimes I really miss my warrant card, not to mention my Smith & Wesson revolver. These kind of images...
I've seen your revolver, it's massive.
These kind of images are causing the brain drain, the dollar drain, the euro exodus, and those with many, many great British pounds being petrified and fleeing the country. Unfortunately, that £100,000 you talked about on the Lamborghini is also being spent in this country on housing illegal migrants and clothing them and feeding them, and the list of wastage goes on and on and on. The police in the UK abandoned the streets many decades ago because they felt that patrol was not worthwhile. Utter nonsense. As a result, we've got a knife crime epidemic. We've got a shoplifting epidemic. We've got fly tipping blighting the country, almost every corner of the nation. The police need to get a grip and get on the streets once again, have a presence, relentless, stopping and searching, catching criminals in the act and reassuring the public. Until that happens, this country is going to continue to slide ever more towards a lawless hellhole.
Susan, I was in Boots yesterday in East Putney. I was buying some foundation for Mrs. Dolan for her combination skin, and I've got to tell you that I was shocked. I needed an employee to come over and unlock the cupboard containing basic makeup for like a tenner, right? This is not Estee Lauder's elite level, Christian Dior. This is the basics.
Why aren't you buying your wife the very, very best, most expensive?
Well, that's another, and hell will be paid when I get home today.
Yeah, but in seriousness, those poor people that run those businesses. I was actually out in Havering talking to people that run shops, and they're terrified when these people come in, and they stand back because they've been told not to, attack them or tell them off. So they come in, they help themselves, and off they go. I mean, Peter's absolutely right. We need more police on the streets actually patrolling, but also in London, which is where I concentrate, obviously, Sadiq Khan needs to put more money into it. The police said that they were £260 million short, yet that money has disappeared. Sadiq Khan doesn't care, quite frankly. He's a dreadful mayor. He should be looking at these dreadful grooming gangs. He also needs to look at what we would call lower level crime, which is shoplifting, which is mobile phone takeover.
Okay.
But it's all important because it makes us feel unsafe.
Susan, thank you so much for your time. Susan Hall, Conservative Group member at the London Assembly, and Peter Blexley, former Met Police detective. Sadiq Khan will be very clear that he's investing heavily to tackle crime in London. He's very clear that London is one of the safest cities in the world in his watch, with homicide down, and that Britain gets safer and richer by the day thanks to his strong and brave leadership. Well, it's all about opinions. Paul says, good morning, Mark. As a retired police officer who worked on these inquiries, the bond between gang members is not determined by their ethnicity. They're bound by one thing, their Islamic beliefs. It is a simple and uncomfortable truth. Here's a voice note from Tim.
Sir Sadiq Khan, what a disgrace. He should never have been made a sir. He should be removed from office immediately. He's a danger to society and Londoners especially. He's a horrible, horrible man, and no one likes him for what he's done to London, not for his creed or his colour or whatever, any faith, just because of how he's treated London since he got into power. And obviously, we all know, we've all seen that Susan Hall interrogation of him and him just worming around like a little foolish little teenager boy in a playground. Disgusting. And that particular video of the London Assembly boils my blood.
Thank you for that. Someone else that's got blood boiling is Linda in Stalybridge, who's not happy with Edwina Currie throwing shade on Reform UK. Linda says, good morning, Mark. Edwina Currie is wrong. Reform are still getting their ducks in a row where the Tory ducks have drowned. Nigel doesn't always go into chambers due to the abuse and no backing from the Speaker. Edwina has got a short memory. She said about getting things right, but they did nothing in the last 14 years. Peter says Edwina criticises Farage, then admits that she doesn't know him. Sour grapes, I think. More on this next. 56 minutes past 9 is a Talk Breakfast.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, if you're joining us, we've got some breaking news. An unhappy birthday for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor as police have arrived on the Sandringham estate. We don't know the full details, but clearly